Thank you. And can someone accept that? There we go. All right. My advancer is not advancing. There we go. Thank you. All right. Here's today's agenda. If we could go ahead and take a quick vote to approve today's agenda. All in favor, say yes or raise your hand. All right. Great, thank you. And then the previous meeting minutes have been posted online and I believe they were emailed out. So can we also take a vote to approve the previous meeting minutes? All in favor, say aye. All right, thanks everyone. I'll turn it back over to you, Dan.
Great, thank you. Again, thanks for everyone that are here physically, as well as the folks that are participating virtually as well. I prefer to have everyone here, but you know, depending on a lot of different situations, folks have the cold or COVID or other issues. It's nice to have this virtual option for everyone. But for the folks that are not able to be here, I feel like almost everyone in the water world has been here to the Headwater Center at least once, and it's a very special place. And let me turn it over to Holly, who helps manage this amazing facility, just to say a few words about the place and help welcome us too. Does that sound good? And she had surgery on her foot recently, so she's rolling over here. Yeah, that's perfect. Just grab one of those.
See. Oh, there you go. Hello, everyone. I'm Holly Riebel. I'm the Executive Director of the Headwater Center. I'd like to welcome you and thank you so much for having your meeting here. We're honored. I mean, what you're doing here is part of our mission. We try to hold forums. We can have collaborative debates and solutions to water conservation. Also, one of our big missions is water conservation education, and we have our River Journey Museum downstairs. I hope that each of you get the opportunity, of course, the people away can't, but if you could go through the museum, it's open, and so feel free at your leisure to go through that if you have time afterwards or a break. But Bob Fanch, who's the founder of the Headwater Center, he started this about 2018, and he runs Devil's Thumb Ranch too, and I'm sure maybe a lot of you know him already. He apologizes for not being able to welcome you himself, but he's in Italy right now, and but he told me to welcome everyone, and he's very excited that you're here. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions at all about the center later on, or questions about the museum, just let me know. Thank you.
Great, thanks Holly. And this is truly a spectacular building. And if you look at some of the beams here, these are Civil War era that I think came from Ohio. Is that right? Or the Midwest somewhere?
Correct. Yeah. So they deconstructed the barn and then reconstructed it. It's also, the building is almost all off the grid. It's about 90%. And so we get our energy from solar, battery powered, and a lot of the systems that we have here are sustainable. Even our turf outside in the amphitheater, it's all kind of astroturf. And so we practice a lot of sustainability here, and besides just also teaching water conservation. So
great, awesome. Well, thanks Holly.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Well, good. As I mentioned, we want to welcome you all here to this amazing facility, but I also want to welcome our newest member of the Interbasin Compact Committee, Ernest House Jr. He is virtually with us today. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it in person, but as I think many of you know, he took the position that Paul Brochet had when Paul moved to CWCB. Ernest will be an amazing new board member. He was able to participate in CWCB's Water Equity Task Force. He's been a great leader on, I would say, everything Western Slope issues too, growing up in the Southwest part of Colorado. And I'm really proud to call him my friend too. So Ernest, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and see if there are any questions too for you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Executive Director Gibbs. Mike DeGuven, the Goyak, that means hello, my friends in Ute. I apologize, I'm one of those that just getting over a cold or a flu Thankfully, it's not COVID, but I wish I could be with you all there in person. Look forward to joining you all. Like Executive Director Gibbs had mentioned, I'm a member of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe from southwestern Colorado, born and raised in Cortez. And I split my time between the Southwest, Montezuma County, and up in the Denver metro area. I serve as a senior policy director for the Keystone Policy Center. And there I'm also the director for tribal and indigenous engagement, where I work with tribal nations, local government, state agencies, and federal agencies across the country on tribal issues from water to natural resources to education to healthcare, and you name it. Prior to going to Keystone, I served as the executive director for the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs under Governors Owens, Ritter, and Hickenlooper for about 12 years, and have served with a lot of tribal leaders over that time frame. It's an honor to be a part of this group. I grew up with a lot of water advocates in the Southwest. My father was a longtime tribal leader and served, and really one of his passionate projects was the completion of the Dolores Water Project in 1987. And then, of course, with the Animalist La Plata Project in Durango, finalizing in 2010. So look forward to meeting you all in person. And thank you again for the opportunity to serve with this distinguished group. Loyak, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ernest. Any questions for Ernest? I know some of you may have worked with him before, probably even some of you, he may be brand new, but any questions for him or anything? Okay. Well, welcome on board. We're really excited to have you be a part of this. And so just moving forward, at our last June meeting, that many of us were there in person, I really felt like there was a lot of awesome energy in the room. It was kind of like, well, it was big, it was historic because the draft water plan was also released that day, but it kind of felt like it was like the first real meeting for IBCC in person too. And that was really wonderful to be all in person here to, discuss our water challenges, but have local and state leaders all working together collaboratively on water. And trying to find that sweet spot is just so important, to say the least. I felt like the conversation was quite moving. And as you probably recall, I issued a challenge to all you to help move and help develop a local project in your basin. So, and have that move towards, the grant making process. So I'm excited to hear, later on today, kind of as you give updates of what's going on in your basin, and also any, projects that you feel passionate about moving forward. I'm excited to hear how that's going, and also, see where the state could be helpful in getting those projects off the ground too, which I think is really awesome. In today's agenda, we're going to discuss some hot topics going on. So we'll hear from Amy Ostick, and she'll give us updates on what's going on with everything Colorado River. Then we'll hear from each member for a brief update on the work that you're doing to advance project or other relevant kind of basin topics that you're all working on. And then right before our break for lunch, we'll hear from Lauren Riss and Nate Pearson, and they'll discuss kind of the landscape of funding that we're all, anxious about. So really excited to hear from them. And then following lunch, we'll have a panel discussion on project advancement in 3 basins, a deeper look into some of the work that members are working on since the June meeting. So we'll hear from Carol Acarius, we'll hear from Heather Dutton, and Greg Peterson will share kind of what they're working on. We'll also hear updates from the Water Plan Subcommittee for PEPO, and then we'll wrap up for the day. So with that in mind, really want this to be a fluid agenda, and just wanted to see if everyone is kind of nodding. Does that sound pretty good to everyone? Everyone saw the agenda and so forth. Okay, good. And I just want to also connect on this challenge I've kind of called you all on. When Russ George envisioned compact negotiations, I believe it was in the spirit of having IBCC facilitate local discussions in and between basins. But Russ was really first to note that it was you know, we need to have these discussions also like outside the IBCC as well. And just right down the street is a great example of kind of a learning by doing project with the Windy Gap Connectivity Channel. So it's just a great example of where interbasin discussions are happening, leading to projects that are moving forward. And obviously that's what, Stan, how many years in the works? Many, many years, at least 20. Yeah.
1976.
Yeah, so right around the time I was born. So where can, you know, IBCC lean in? And that's always where we can talk about, you know, interests that come up and ways that we can discuss, like ways that we can really be leading. And I think that IBCC can lead in a variety of different ways. And that's just, you know, a great example of kind of a localized project. I'm trying to think here what else. So with that, you know, let's really dive into the agenda right now. How about and have Amy Ostick kind of give an update on everything Colorado River, and then we can kind of go from there. Does that sound good? Okay, good. All right, Amy.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. I apologize I can't be there in person. It seems like there are just a million things going on these days. So I'm actually going to be traveling for a Platte River meeting this afternoon. So I appreciate the ability to be with you virtually and wish I could be there in person. So I am just going to provide a few quick updates on Colorado River interstate discussions and Colorado River issues in general. I'm trying to see if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So, you know, it sometimes feels a little bit like we're living in Groundhog Day when it comes to Colorado River issues. I know that we see a whole lot about Colorado River in the news. You know, discussions are continuing, but it sometimes feels like progress can be really slow. But nonetheless, I do want to provide some updates on what we've been working on in terms of implementing our 5-point plan in the upper basin, and also just give a little bit of context for what's going on in the lower basin. So this is where I'm going to start today. I think you all have probably seen this graphic before, but I think it's an important place to start and keep going back to. You know, back in June, the Commission of Reclamation called for 2 to 4 million acre feet of conservation needed to protect the Lake Powell and Lake Mead critical infrastructure at those reservoirs. So the reason I want to start here is because I will continue to emphasize the fact that the suite of potential options that are available to us to resolve this issue really vary by basin. And that is for a lot of reasons, one of which, you know, we have depleted storage up here in the upper basin. We all know that. We've seen what's happened at Blue Mesa Reservoir. And also because our water users are already facing really significant shortages. So what that means is that, you know, when it comes time to conserve even more, we've already kind of given, and our water users are already really, really cut back. And so again, I just kind of wanted to start the discussion here again and show that, you know, we have done a good job in the upper basin of reducing our uses based on hydrology. And as we all know, that is due to the operation of the prior appropriation doctrine. When water is physically or legally not available to our water users, they don't use it. So that's why we had a reduction in uses by 1 million acre feet between 2020 and 21. We just don't have those big storage buckets above us to draw from. And of course, in contrast, the lower basin states have continued to have the ability to use, you know, just south of 10 million acre feet of water, and that's from the main stem alone. So again, because of the way that, you know, water use works across the basin, the options available to us differ accordingly. So there has been kind of this increased recognition, I think, that the primary solutions are going to have to come from the lower basin states. One thing I also want to mention here is that this graphic is actually part of a new infographics package that we put together, kind of explaining those things and hopefully clear ways showing, just physically how the water is used, where the water is used, and why. So we have, like I said, a great graphics package. It's on our website. Sarah Leonard can also help you out if you have an event or if you just need some, Colorado River information. Please do not hesitate to get in touch with Sarah, and she can hook you up with our newest round of graphics. A couple notes here in terms of lower basin uses in particular. The lower basin states will be in a tier 2A shortage in 2023. That means that they will be required to reduce their demands out of Lake Mead by 721,000 acre feet of water. I want to be clear about what that means and what it doesn't mean. And I think that you've probably heard Becky and I talk about this a little bit, but in 2022, the lower basin states were also in shortage. What we saw happen is that they essentially offset those shortages by taking more water out of Lake Mead from their intentionally created surplus accounts. Those are accounts that give the lower basin states the ability to store water for later use. So California in particular, looking at the drought that was taking place in the northern part of their state, drew more of their ICS out of Lake Mead than perhaps they otherwise would have. So even though you see these shortages, when you look at the OSM guidelines of DCPs and you see on paper, oh, that's the amount of water that they'll be shorted. In reality, it sometimes isn't the case because they have these abilities to kind of offset those shortages. So when you just look at the simple mass balance issue, what that means is the reservoirs continue to decline. We see that at Lake Powell as well, where, we had 6 million acre feet of inflow this year and 7 million acre feet left Lake Powell. So it's not hard to see why this situation is continuing and why the reservoirs are in critical decline right now. There's simply more going out than is coming in. And that unfortunately is continuing. So, sorry, I keep thinking I can change the slides myself, but I can't. Can you go on to the next slide, please? So what are we doing about all this? Well, I want to give some updates on what we've been working on in the Upper Basin with implementation of our 5-point plan. And I'll also provide an update on some Lower Basin discussions that have been going on. So in the Upper Basin, we responded to that call for action pretty quickly and proactively. The commissioner came out in June with that request for 2 to 4 million acre feet, and we put out our plan in mid-July. And I've talked through these components with all of you previously, so I won't go through each one individually, but just wanted to highlight what we've been working on to implement this plan. So the first one, and where we've been spending a lot of time lately, is reauthorization of the System Conservation Pilot Program. This would be temporary voluntary compensated reductions in use in the Upper Basin. Sounds a lot like demand management, but that water, we wouldn't be required to monitor and verify and get it to Powell in the same way. There would still be monitoring and verification. We're still going out to make sure that the field is fallowed or things like that, but it's not the same level of scrutiny that would be in a demand management program. So a couple things need to happen to get this program actually set up. One is that we actually need the federal reauthorization for that to happen. There was a bill introduced in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, but that's as far as we've seen it go so far. We are hopeful that we'll see this reauthorized soon. That's what we're supporting and pushing for. But as we await that, we've been hard at work with the other Upper Division state staff, making sure that we have a framework for this program, that we know how it's going to operate once it is reauthorized. So the types of things we're looking at are, how is that money going to flow? We are working to ensure that the Upper Division states and the UCRC in particular are the ones who are making the decisions about, which projects we're going to fund. So we're working on getting that program, ready to set up as soon as we have that federal reauthorization in hand. Also we have the drought response operations agreement and our commitment to expedite the planning process for that. So we're starting to have some initial discussions. And a point I want to make here is that, we hear frequently, well, why don't you have a specific number identified yet? And again, as you all know, we can't we don't know how much snowpack we're going to get until we get it. We don't know how full our reservoirs are going to be until we get snowpack. So we can't commit to a firm number for a drought response action until we have more information. But we are starting those discussions. You know, we've done it once already, so hopefully this time it'll go a little bit more smoothly. And that, of course, you know, remains subject to the effectiveness of that water. We want that water to stay in Lake Powell, and that's something that we're continuing to push for, and will continue to inform the decisions that we make in terms of what potential 2023 drill release will be. Continuing the demand management feasibility investigation, you all can expect to see a bit more information coming out from the Upper Colorado River Commission's investigation in the coming months. And that might give us some information about what the next steps are, what additional issues we might want to consider in Colorado, and what each upper division state might want to continue thinking about in terms of a potential demand management program. So those are kind of the highlights. You know, of course, we're still also working on looking at the best uses for this federal infrastructure fund money, federal infrastructure bill money. And in particular, we're looking at opportunities for increasing measurement and monitoring across the upper basin states. So again, the upper division state technical staff have been hard at work at prioritizing those types of projects and siting and things like that. And, you know, I know I said I wasn't going to go through all these, but I feel like I have to say something about the last one, because I think this is a continued kind of misunderstanding or disconnect. You know, we continue to believe that the most impactful thing that can be done for the Colorado River Basin is to live within the means of what the river provides every year. We do that through restricted water rights administration. That hasn't been done in the lower basin. We have not seen reductions in use when the hydrology is low. So we believe that, you know, implementing that type of response across the basin would be a really great idea. That water usage should really be in line with hydrologic and legal availability. That's what we do up here. That is why our water users face painful shortages every year. That is why we feel that we have already given quite a lot to the basin in terms of living within its means. So we'll continue to do that. And it's an important, I think, message to get out to make sure people really understand what that looks like across the upper basin and for our water users. So we're trying to make sure people have a full understanding of that. A couple of updates out of the lower basin. You may have seen the letter from California. I think it was a 2-page letter indicating that they were considering reductions in use up to 400,000 acre feet of water. You know, and we are encouraged to see that they are putting that down on paper, but we haven't seen any specifics of how that would actually work. So we're kind of awaiting more information on that. And aside from that, we haven't really seen a concrete plan out of the lower basin. We are continuing to support very strongly the idea that evaporation and transit losses should be accounted for in the lower basin. So when water gets delivered out of Lake Mead to lower basin states, it's not assessed evaporation and transit losses. If that were done, that would conserve 1.2 to 1.5 million acre feet of water every year. So that would make a big dent in getting us towards that 2 to 4 million acre feet conservation goal that the commissioner set out. And it frankly would also just bring the lower basin into line with what we are already doing in the upper basin, and in more in line with the reality. Evaporation happens, and it especially happens in a desert. So that is really one of our primary priorities is pushing to get that evap and transit loss accounted for in the lower basin, because that really gets us a good part of the way there. If you could go to the next slide. I'm not sure if I actually have another one. So that is really about all I have for you today. Like I said, there haven't been a lot of concrete developments in the lower basin, unfortunately. Those difficult discussions are continuing, but we still believe in the upper basin that we can continue to do our part. We can work hard towards implementing our 5-point plan and use the options that are available to us to do our part to protect the system, recognizing that those are really limited because of what we've already given from our storage and just from taking shortages year after year. So with that, I think I will stop there and see if anyone has any questions.
Great, Amy, thanks for your presentation. I think there are a few questions here. We'll start with Aaron.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for the update. I assume you can hear me. You're nodding, so I think you can.
I can't.
I had a couple of questions. First one, in the 5-point plan, you mentioned the reauthorization of system conservation, and I've gotten mixed answers about whether, let's assume system conservation is reauthorized, knock on wood, would that rely on funding from the IRA, or are we hoping for independent funding to be attached specifically for that program?
Yeah, that's a good question. And right now we're looking at IRA funding. So, there's a $4 billion pot of money in the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically to address drought in the Western United States. And what we've heard is that the priority will be in the Colorado River Basin. So we believe that that'll be a good pot of money for the System Conservation Pilot Program, which reminds me of something else I just wanted to let you all know about that you may have seen. The Bureau of Reclamation did put out a request for proposals in the lower basin states for conservation with a pricing structure that kind of varies depending on the length of the project. I can drop a link in the chat to that announcement, and that's kind of the lower basin's, I guess, counterpart to what we'll be doing with the System Conservation Pilot Program in the upper basin. So sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier, but they are working on getting that rolled out in the lower basin, and you can expect to see, as soon as we're reauthorized, the same type of, something coming out for the upper basin.
And one other question, thank you for that. On your first slide, which I've seen, I think that was similar or the same as what you were handed out at Water Congress. Do you have, and are you able to share the breakdown within the bars of, I mean, you have, I don't have it in front of me now, but 9 or however many million acre feet. So how much of that, for example, is evaporation? How much is it for, I don't know how much, I'm sure there is information behind that. I don't know if you're at liberty to share. Is it, what percentage is California, or even by districts? It'd just be really interesting to see for both the upper and lower basin, kind of what's, behind the curtain on those. So is that something you're able to provide?
Yeah, so that it's a somewhat complicated question. I would just want to start by saying this actually doesn't include evaporation. This is
It doesn't include evaporation.
It does not. This is main stem use. Some evaporation might be kind of inherently included in it, if that makes sense, but certainly not all of it. We might be able to get something of a breakdown. It's a little bit challenging because of the various ICS agreements and just kind of how those work. I can certainly check in with our technical folks and see what we can get. We can probably provide something. It's just a little bit nuanced, I guess, is what I'll say.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate any effort you can make. Would be really interesting to see. Thanks a lot.
Great. Pat, and then Stan, and then we can also go online. I'm sure there's some questions.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Pat Wells, really appreciate the presentation and the frequent updates to IBCC. I did have a question along the lines of what Aaron said and wanted to thank you all for the infographics package. It's really helpful in communicating to our customers and stakeholders credible information on the Colorado River that comes from CWCB and others. So really appreciate that, and really want to be able to tell the story of overuse in the lower basin and how, even in some years, I understand that once you account for evaporation and other, usage on tributaries and that sort of thing, that their consumption can be up in north of 12 million acre feet in some years when we're really trying to save and conserve here in the upper basin. The other question that I had for you is, do you have any indication of what the next major milestone or event may be that could trigger a lot of news coverage, the need for a quick and timely response from Colorado and the other upper basin states? I hear that just a lot of anxiety in the water community and among stakeholders about it's almost a little too quiet right now. And are we waiting till after the midterms, or what's the next big event we should be planning for that's going to drive the news cycle and the strategy for response by Colorado and the upper basin states?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you know, I can tell you what I'm hoping the next news item will be, and maybe also answer the question of why it's been so quiet, which is that, you know, there are some difficult discussions going on right now in the lower basin. And, you know, we are doing what we can to kind of encourage what we think the outcome should be, and what we think should happen, and also allowing some of those difficult discussions to take place. So my hope would be that at some point soon, we see a concrete plan of action coming out of the lower basin in terms of, you know, a plan for accounting for evaporation and transit losses out of Lake Mead, for example, and maybe some additional larger scale conservation efforts. That's what my hope is. And I don't know that I can, sitting here today, tell you the likelihood that that will happen. But that's kind of the hope, you know. And what we've kind of learned, I think, through all of this is that we need to understand the numbers, the specifics before really responding or reacting to those plans that might come out. You know, we saw the 500+ plan come out at CRUA in Vegas a year ago, and everyone was very excited about it, but it hasn't materialized. So what we've learned, I think, through this process is, you know, show us exactly how that's going to work. We need to have a better understanding of how this will actually impact elevations at Lake Mead, how much, you know, water is actually leaving the system. So, you know, in terms of what information might be coming out in our response, I think our response to anything is going to be a little bit cautious and measured as we take the time we need to understand what the plan actually means. And that can be hard, to be completely honest, in the media cycle, the way that it is working right now in Colorado River issues. Everyone wants to know right away, you know, what is this and how does it work? And sometimes you need the extra time to really understand it. So that is what I'm hoping for. The other bit of information that will probably be coming out is the UCRC is going to be concluding its demand management feasibility investigation. And what I mean by that is that, you know, they had a federal grant, they had federal funds that they were using to fund some of that work, and those are expiring. So that doesn't mean that there will be a feasibility determination at CRUA, and I want to be very clear about that. But what it does mean is that we might see a report out from that. We might have a little bit more information about what's been learned from that investigation that can then, you know, help us understand what the next steps are. So another, I feel like these days more and more of my job has become, you know, communications oriented. I expect a lot of people will see that and they will think, oh, is this a feasibility finding? What does this mean? And I think, you know, we'll need to be clear, hey, you know, this is just kind of a report out from the UCRC's investigation and a consideration of what the next steps might be. So that's another kind of newsy thing that might be happening. Is it possible that the lower basin state, speaking of CRUA, I think a lot of times there's this kind of pressure around, you know, putting something out at CRUA, some kind of announcement. So will we see some kind of announcement from the lower basin states akin to what I was just referring to? It's possible, but I don't think we really know yet. I think that there's more uncertainty right now in terms of Colorado River interstate discussions than there has been in quite a while. So those are kind of some things that might be happening, but again, we don't really know yet. So we're a little bit in wait and see mode.
Great, thanks, Amy. Stan?
I think prior to Stan, because I think Pat's question actually answered a whole bunch of what I was going to ask. But, you know, what we get is a lot of questions about what's the status. And as far as directing people to the best, most updated information, is that going to be your info package? And also, does that going to include any information we'll have from the state engineer's office on what he's doing with respect to potential administration?
Yeah, so I guess to take the first part of your question, first, I will say we have been really trying to up our game in terms of communications, realizing there's just more of a need than there's ever been. So we did start we call it the Commissioner's Corner website as part of our CWCB site, where you can find the most recent information, including, implementation of the 5-point plan, statements coming out from Becky as commissioner, things like that. I'll drop a link to that in the chat. I don't know if Kevin Ryan is there in person or here, but he might be able to provide a little bit more information on how to get the best information on his efforts relating to the measurement rules. And I do want to be, I want to distinguish those, that we're not in compact administration, but he can provide some information about the measurement rule process and anything else that they're putting information out on. But that might have a separate place than our information that we're putting out from CWCB. So I'll let Kevin address that.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. And Kevin is not online, but we can follow up with him, of course. And folks that are online, if you do have a question, just simply, raise your hand, and I'll do my best to kind of see you online as well. Other questions for folks in the room? And I have one, Amy, for the system conservation pilot program. I think that's a 4-year pilot project, and it looks like it's authorizing language to allow more or less, multi-state demand management programs to move forward, and with no money attached to it. So the goal is within the IRA is to have, 500 million more or less to help fund those projects in the Upper Basin is kind of my assumption. It's not directly tied, but it kind of is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I do just want to draw a quick distinction that this would not be a demand management program. That system conservation pilot program would be separate from a potential demand management program. But you're correct that the authorization we're seeking would not have any funds attached to it. It would just be saying essentially, yes, go forth and do this. You are authorized to do it. And then we would presumably use that IRA fund bucket to actually fund the program. So that's correct.
Oh, great. Thanks. Tom?
Yeah, Dan, you just kind of triggered my thoughts there. Amy, at what level of a system conservation pilot is being contemplated? Will that be administered through CWCB, or how would that be handled? And once you answer, I might have a follow-up.
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of what level is anticipated, this will be a fully voluntary program. So the extent of the program will depend on how many people want to participate, to be honest, and how much funding we have, of course. I will say, the last time we did SCPP, we had, I think, about $15 million contributed over a 4-year period. Conserved, I think, around 45,000 acre feet of water in that time. So just for reference, that is how it worked before. We, I think, have the potential to get more money this time, and it's kind of yet to be determined what the interest level will be. But we certainly, when SCPP was up and running previously, we saw the interest increase every year. So that's all to say, I don't know. It will be dependent on how many people want to participate. And I think there was a second question in there that I maybe didn't answer, but I'm not sure.
No, you answered what I asked. I guess my just more of a comment is because of the already shortages that the Western Slope in particular, but that Colorado and the Upper Basin has taken already, I'm concerned that if we have too big of a level in system conservation, that water just goes into the system, becomes administered through the guidelines of the reservoir operations, and then more or less we take those additional shortages and allow the lower basin to continue to overuse. much better. I don't mind the system conservation pilots at a small level to prove we can do it, to kind of get our feet wet as far as developing procedures and how the operation would be. But it just seems like given the overuse in the lower basin and our already taking shortages, that if we're going to continue, if we're going to increase conservation, that we need much better through demand management to put it in a pool that goes to the credit of the upper basin to be able to be used to meet our delivery obligations and not allowed to just be passed through the reservoirs. So that's a comment more, and anyone else can comment back. But
I think that's a point well taken. And, you know, I think you've probably heard Commissioner Mitchell say that the efficacy of our plan, our 5-point plan, the upper basin, is really dependent upon action taken in the lower basin. And I think that you can interpret that a number of ways, but one I think way to think about that is, you know, the extent to which our water users will feel compelled to participate in a program knowing that, you know, there is ongoing overuse in the lower basin. So, you know, we are trying to do our part while also pushing for meaningful, sustainable action where it really needs to happen. So I understand the point you're making. You know, the other thing that I'll mention here is that this is part of the reason that we feel it's really important that the UCRC really be the entity that manages this program as it was before, so that, you know, we are very much involved in making decisions about which projects and how many projects to select in a given year, and just making decisions that make sense in light of our broader strategy and policy considerations, and that are protective of our water users. So those are certainly issues that are in our minds as we go through this.
Great, thanks, Amy. Any more questions? I don't see any online yet. And any in the room? Any more follow-up or questions for Amy? Okay, see none. Thanks, Amy. Thanks for joining us, giving us these updates, really important. Next up are our basin updates. And, you know, it's interesting, as a mountain person, we, you know, got our first kind of dusting of snow a couple of days ago. And you see that, you know, here in Winter Park, and at my house, I got maybe 1.5 inches or so of snow. And then the ski resort, I saw like photos of, Tom and I were kind of talking about it, some magical spot on the mountain that it looked like it was maybe 8 inches or so. But I bring this up because as someone that deeply cares about water, but also outdoor recreation enthusiast who likes to ski and just kind of be outdoors, I really start paying attention to the SNOTEL sites, you know, after the first few, you know, first little bit of snow even, you know. And so I looked online, and these are the numbers from yesterday. But Upper Colorado headwaters, you know, 164%. Yampa White was listed at 199, and you know, San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan 333%, Rio 197, South Platte 41, Arkansas 106. But you know, after just it's really, so don't pay too much attention right now, obviously. But it's something that I know that you all are going to pay, obviously, in your basins, very, very close attention as this snow year progresses. So with that, I just anxious to hear kind of what's going on in your basin, what projects you're personally kind of passionate about or that you're championing or working on, and just kind of general updates. So let's start with the basin, the basins first, and then we can go around the room and also online to hear from governor appointees as well. We'll do governor appointees after the basins, just like what we did in the last meeting. Does that sound good? Let's maybe just start over here. Tom, you want to start? And then we'll just kind of go around the room here, and then we'll go online.
sure. So in our basin, the Yampa Basin, and Jeff, my compatriot, I'll give a little bit more addition here in a minute, but I would say that there's 2 points I'd make. What's going on in our basin and the comments I get from my constituents out in the community is related to what we just talked about with Amy's report. And it happens very frequently, is what's going on with the water? I mean, they watch the news, they watch the lake levels, and most of the time that question is framed in the context of they're going to steal all of our water and take it down the river. So people are very on edge. They're aware that this is not business as usual. Things are different now, and they're wanting to know what's leadership in the water world planning to do about it. And of course, I don't have that answer. That's why we're here today. None of us have a trite answer for that question. So that's, I'd say that's the main thing that's going on is people are anxious. As far as projects that I think are, I want to champion, and I know it's not just in our basin, but is better measurement and monitoring of the hydrology. And a case in point is this year, our current models showed 83% snowpack in the Yampa Basin. That's basically high elevation, snowtail sites and so on. And lo and behold, runoff at 60%. And that makes it really hard to figure out what to do when you're coming into spring showing, we're in the 80% range. But then when, particularly reservoir operators are finding it very hard to fill reservoirs based on when the actual runoff turns out to be that much less. So there's some good things being proposed, some better monitoring abilities, the flyover stuff. We all can see that even though 10,000 feet, you have 80%, it doesn't come down the mountain very far, and it's not anything. And of course, that's not very many square miles. It's above 10,000 feet of actual snowpack. So I think that we've already got some possibilities in our basin. I know in other basins in the Western Slope, really get a handle on our hydrology and not be kind of behind the 8 ball all the time. So that's something that we're looking at for projects and spending some money on.
I don't have a lot to add to Tom's overarching view. I think in our basin, that's what we hear. We hear uncertainty and questions about the leadership role and getting a unified view of that. I do, just not to put too fine a point on it, I do hear also from people, and I agree wholeheartedly, that at the national media level, the lower basin has had the best of it. And I think that's a thing that we really have to concentrate on. At the same time that we're working towards a brick and mortar strategy, that's sort of one aspect of this problem, but the message and the way that media message gets carried forward and the specific tuning of that to the things that all upper basin folk can kind of rally around, that's also a big part of this. And I think it's a very, very important part.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Tom and Jeff. Appreciate those updates. Oh, and also just to follow up. Oh, you mentioned the SNOTEL and kind of the aerial. Just what that's kind of part of also projects too. You'd like to further support and so forth too. So it's awesome. Good. Yep. Thank you. We'll skip over Aaron for right now, and yeah, Rick and Lisa.
Kat, I sent you a PowerPoint. I don't know if you could pull it up.
So again, we're going around the room first, and then we'll hit up folks that are online next. Okay.
So I'll say a couple words as we're trying to pull up some slides to tack on. I love the optimism with the snowpack numbers. Everything but the South Platte's looking great. We'll keep those percentages. And just to, we at DIA, I think the measurement was the 3rd warmest summer on record. And Denver Water, we monitored number of days above 90 degrees. And we broke a record this year for 65 days above 90. Yet our water demands are about average. So we're helped with the monsoons, but also conservation and efficiency, which you'll see some of in our projects. Also, just to tack on to the snow observation, We did receive a presentation and are looking at funding a WRSRF grant for additional airborne snow observatory measurements. So having the first flights in the South Platte, we've been doing the Blue River, and we've been doing, there's been flights around the state, but looking at doing the first ASO flights, airborne snow observatory flights in the South Platte this year. And
Please hold.
yeah, if we can't bring them up, we can kind of just
We can
talk
just
through
talk
them.
through, 'em, yeah.
Or you could skip. We're just working on some technical to get PowerPoint going and just get some visuals. So they'll be
Well,
coming soon. But Lisa,
so-
you
I
want to?
Jump in and then you can come back.
Do you want to do that?
So that you, if they're gonna get it.
Let's
Ah.
Okay, here we go.
So
Okay.
should I go ahead and then you can? So Kat, are you the driver here? Yep. Could you go to slide 3, please? There we go. So I think that, and this is Lisa Darling, Metro Roundtable, and that was Rick Marsicek. I'm not sure he got that, but so we're the Metro Roundtable reps, and Dan, you gave us a challenge, a call to action to start advocating for specific projects, and we heard on our work plan subcommittee, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, but we heard more from Paul about just getting your head down and doing the work. And it's such a great story. And so I wanted to just mention what we're doing on the Metro Roundtable. We had talked about how we had done a survey and ranked specific projects. You can see the top 3 projects there, but I wanted to let you know that we are moving forward. So we're keeping our head down. I thought, Jeff, when you were talking about the, telling the story and how the lower basin always seems to get like the shiny penny, we're doing really good things. It's telling the story and getting our story out, right? You're absolutely right. So anyway, if you could, so those were our ranked projects. I think we visited with you last time about that. If you could do one more slide, Kat, please. Those are the 3 top ones. One more. This is where we are. So this is what we've presented to both roundtables, both the Metro and South Platte Roundtable. And of course, we work together on this process. So we are identifying quarterbacks and task force members or committee members to actually start scoping those 3 projects that we've identified. And that's important because we're not just reaching on a steering committee or the executive committee of either roundtable, we're actually expanding that to just members in the community, anyone who has the expertise to actually address and help scope some of these projects. So just one more slide, Kat, please. So these were, we actually presented this to the roundtable and said, here's what we need you to do. We need a quarterback who will do these things. We need committee members who will, engage with us and do these tasks. And one more slide, please. And so this is what we've kind of come up with. So these are the shorthand of our 3 projects. We've got quarterbacks, and we do need one for that last project in case anybody's interested. And then these are the people who are on the committee, and they're both from the community, some from the water community, some from landscape communities, conservation communities. And so we're just very excited about how we're moving this forward. We're doing it quietly, purposefully, but nonetheless, it's a good story to tell. So I don't know, Rick, if you have anything you want to add, and Jim, if you want to join on that. And happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I don't have anything yet. That was a great overview.
I have a question for folks that are, leads, quarterback, and then who's on the team and so forth. Was it simply kind of like, hey, who can step up at this time? And then also kind of like, who are we missing around the table? Who has a history of working on this or that? And there was probably some outreach as well, but just curious how the names kind of came about. Are they all Basin Roundtable members too, or some of them kind of outside experts that you brought in?
That's a great question. So no, these are folks that are both on the roundtable and also people from the community. And it just really grew organically, I'd say. We got the word out. A lot of people spoke to staff and people that you have relationships with in these different areas. And we got a lot of volunteers, and we're continuing to populate those committees, and they will begin that scoping effort looking for spring as a goal for scopes for all 3 projects.
Great questions. I mean, this is awesome. Thanks so much. This is a great model. If any of the other roundtables want to replicate that, that's just absolutely phenomenal. Thanks.
All
Jim,
right.
you're up next.
Good job, Metro people.
Yeah.
Showing our stuff. No, but they did do a good job, and I didn't help a whole lot with it, but and I don't have time to volunteer. So, but no, it is kind of exciting where we're headed, and I think it's a good path forward from your challenge. So I appreciate you challenging us. It always helps. So I'm Jim Yan with the South Platte Basin Roundtable. And I'll start a little closer to home. So with the North Sterling and Pruitt reservoirs, and then I'll expand from there. So it was a little lower year as far as water is, about 20% less than we're used to on the South Platte Basin down there for our irrigation. But we got through, and we're doing okay. But we used our reservoirs completely, which is what they're for anyway. So, but you know, all of the 6 lower reservoirs down there, Riverside, Jackson, Empire, Pruitt, North Sterling, and Jumbo, we're all empty. And so now we're getting a little bit of water back in some of them. And we actually started, because some of our farmers weren't able to irrigate their alfalfa all that they wanted because they saved their water for their corn and sugar beet crops, their row crops. They are now irrigating because it's been a pretty mild fall. So we're running a direct flow right from the river to the through the reservoir out to the farmers, and not letting any slide by to Nebraska. Sorry, but that's just what we do. So, this is also a time of year where I get to talk to people, and I like to tell our story. So I've had the opportunity to talk to Dairy Farmers of America. I talked to Roggen Co-op. They had CoBank, young bankers there out of Denver that came out, and we got to talk about water there. So, and it helps me because it makes me understand that some people don't realize everything that we do out there, and then it helps me understand some of the things that maybe I'm not communicating correctly or things like that. So it's always good to talk to people, and then I talk more to the farm base of local farm bureaus, and then our Pro 15 out there. I got to talk to the 15 Northeast counties out there, and the good thing is, because of inflation, I doubled my speaker's fee, which is still free. So it didn't help a lot. But on other things, with our roundtable on a little bit bigger picture, we are looking at, we always get an update on the Colorado River because, 25% roughly of our water every year comes from the Colorado River on the South Platte Basin. So our native supply on average is about 1.4 million acre feet, and we get about 400,000 acre feet to 450,000 acre feet that comes over from the Colorado Basin. So it's important to us as well. But we actually did appoint a new recreation person this last meeting, and her name is Hallie Stevie, I believe is the pronunciation of her last name. And she's from the Coalition for Poudre River Watershed. So we're excited to have her on board, and we're always looking to fill in those memberships. We are a big roundtable, about 50 people or a little more. So it's pretty big, and we've been meeting quite a bit in person, but also enjoying the new OWL system that the CWCB has, which is very helpful and makes our meetings a little more interactive with those that can't make it. So that's good as well. In our basin, we've had some local projects ourselves. So we're trying to lift a restriction on the Pruitt Reservoir. So, and we had a couple things. We had wave action, and we had some drainage at the toe of our dam. So we're finishing up on our toe dam tow drain project, and we're going to be able to lift our restriction, which is one of the things that, you know, we've been trying to do, and it allows us to store another 3,500 acre feet of water. So it's a pretty big deal for our farmers, and we probably could have used it this year. So, but we will next year if we need it, if we can fill it up. And we also automated all of our on-farm head gates on the North Sterling. So I can, with my phone, check on every farmer that's running water now. And so it makes us more efficient, and it works better, and it gives our farmers a steady stream of water. We did a new diversion structure on the North Sterling and a new measurement structure as well. So we've had a lot of things going in our basin, but then on a bigger scale, we are still working with Parker Water and Sanitation District and the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District on what we call the Platte Valley Water Partnership. And that's really pretty exciting. And, you know, we're looking at ways that will benefit our farmers because it's using existing infrastructure, Reuter Hess Reservoir and Pruitt Reservoir. And we're getting really close to an agreement with Parker with the Pruitt Reservoir. So Lower and Parker already have an agreement to work together, and they filed for a water right back in 2019 to make this project happen. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it's really what we would like to see as a model in the future for how municipalities work with agriculture to fill in a gap that the municipality may have. So we're pretty excited about that. And we're continuing on with our South Platte Regional Opportunity Water Group, SPROG. And so I haven't been able to attend the last couple of meetings, but we're continuing on that big regional look on the South Platte Basin to use our water to the fullest extent that we can. We also have a great project. If you get the chance to go see it, we're having a dam built in our area, a big dam, Chimney Hollow Reservoir. So it's an asphalt core dam. And so it's a 90,000 acre foot. It's part of the Windy Gap Firming Project, but it is, you don't see dams built anymore all that often. And this one is unique to North America because it's an asphalt core dam. So it's, if you want to talk to Brad Wind, I'm sure he'd be happy to show any of you around on what's going on, but that's pretty exciting that we get to increase some storage. And that's one of the goals of the water plan, is to increase storage as well. And then lastly, of course, on the bigger Platte scale is the state of Nebraska. And so the latest news there is this, the Nebraska officials who are looking at the feasibility and spending some of that $53.5 million that the Nebraska legislature authorized to begin the feasibility, land acquisition, study of the Perkins County Canal so that they can utilize the winter part of the compact on the South Platte Basin. So there's two different, there's a summertime compact obligation, and the governor of Nebraska in several talks that he's given around Nebraska saying Colorado's not meeting that compact, which is not true. Even because he kept saying, well, they're supposed to deliver 120 cubic feet per second at the state line from April 1st to October 15th, but that's not entirely true. We're supposed to deliver 120 cubic feet per second on an 1897 water right. And if there's not enough there, we have to curtail everything junior to 1897, which Colorado did. And our water officials are always on top of that. So we are always meeting the summertime compact, but they're looking to exercise the wintertime portion of that. And so Nebraska in the latest is they invited a bunch of people from the like the Julesburg, Sedgwick County area to a meeting concerning land acquisition. And it was held in Big Springs, Nebraska. And so Joe Frank, one of our guys, was in attendance, and it was more of kind of table set up, but they were offering $120 per acre just for a 30-month right to work on a right of way through your land to build this canal. So they are kind of moving forward, but Joe was recognized as somebody in attendance because somebody saw him, because Joe's been talking to a lot of reporters in Nebraska. Are you Joe Frank? They said, yes. Yes, he said I am. So anyway, but that's kind of the exciting things kind of going on in our area. And we continue to work with Nebraska. Actually, tomorrow, each year, Nebraska sends some water officials over, and tomorrow they're meeting with our water commissioner. And so I'm going to be part of the tour and show them what we're doing. But the water officials have never been the problem. They all know that we're meeting the compact obligation. It's more the politician and government part of that doesn't understand the compact that we have with them. So that's my update.
Well, thanks, Jim. A lot going on. Appreciate that. Questions, Lisa?
Yeah, maybe a question for you, Dan, or for Kelly. I'm just curious, because we've heard a lot of, Joe Frank on a wanted poster sort of things too, but I was just curious, are we engaged in discussions? And if so, like who and what and where, how are we addressing that? Or are we both just sort of, is it sort of not a standoff, but all quiet on the front for now?
It's been mostly, and Kelly can jump in too, but it's been mostly seeing what Nebraska's saying in the news and us reacting. And it's been less actually meaningful conversations. We're still waiting on a plan, frankly. And as Jim mentioned, we're following the rules. We're following what was contemplating what says in the 1923 compact. There's nothing that we've done wrong. So it's a lot of rhetoric, I would say. But our attorneys of the state and Nebraska attorneys have had some discussions, but it's been very limited. And again, it's interesting because we have elections right around the corner. Nebraska does as well. So we know that there will be a new governor in a few months. And the cabinet member for the natural resources is a political appointee just like me. And quite often you have new members of cabinet that come in. So it'll be interesting to see how things, kind of shake out politically and who's in charge and to see if this is really a priority for Nebraska moving forward or not. And I think we're just kind of a wait and see a little bit. Kelly, anything to add? Yeah, probably so folks online can hear.
Can you hear me? Okay. Not too much to add, Dan. I think you summed it up really well. We are a little bit wait and see because we haven't seen anything substantive from Nebraska, but in the meantime, we have built a really strong team to respond to be proactive, to really make sure that Colorado's interests are protected. So that's all I would add.
Thanks. Thanks, Kelly. Any other questions for Jim? Okay, thanks, Jim. Thanks for the report. Really interesting. Next up is Barbara, and I feel like it was yesterday, but a few weeks ago, I was able to attend the North Platte Basin Roundtable meeting up in Walden and really enjoyed it. So it was great to spend some time up there.
Thanks for being able to say you really enjoyed it. I understand you were given a rough time. So first, I want to apologize twice for being MIA. I was not at the June meeting. I had a serious family health issue. And at the roundtable meeting, I was on family travel. So again, I apologize for not being there. And I really appreciate you coming up to Walden in the face of not only some of the water challenges, but the wolf challenges. It has to be said, it's challenging for all of us.
Barbara, I'll just jump in really quick.
Yeah,
so we, on the front end, we heard from folks in the roundtable that said, okay, that's great that Water Conservation Board staff are going to come up and kind of give an update on the water plan and so forth. And we heard that folks really want to talk about wolves. And, the CWCB staff is, not really working on wolves like other parts of the Department of Natural Resources. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity for me to head up and just kind of almost create like a town hall meeting to be like, hey, what's on your mind? Water, wolves, state parks, you name it. And it was a robust conversation and did enjoy it.
Yeah, all of the above, I think. Yeah. So again, thank you very much for making the trip. So we're not part of the Colorado Basin. The report I have to give is a little bit different, a little bit of rearview mirror of where we've been since the 2015 BIP. So because of the COVID restrictions and the either discomfort or lack of familiarity or lack of broadband, the virtual meeting path was not chosen by our chair. So we had very infrequent meetings through the work time zone to create the updated BIP. I had argued strongly for, and this is a personal concern, to actually put the effort in to make a meaningful update. What we have is a 2015 with a few minor changes. But if we look at what was accomplished between the 2020 BIP and the 2015, the vast majority of projects that were approved and funded through the Water Supply Reserve account were for irrigation infrastructure, on the ground hardware to improve efficiency or replace decrepit irrigation structures, or put in measuring devices more recently. All of that's perfectly appropriate in a basin that is dominated by large ranches and irrigated ag, which brings some environmental and recreational benefits in terms of keeping the open space, particularly more recently with the conservation easements a number of the large ranches have put in place, preserving that open space. But there has been very little, almost nothing done in specifically environmental or recreational projects. Since I've been the environmental rep since 2006, I'm taking my prerogative at this table to call that out. It's something I've brought up with our roundtable before and keep advocating for. And in terms of the challenge that you issued in June, I might call out the Werner SWA rehabilitation of the riverbed. It has widened, it's eroding adjacent ranch land. The water heats up because it's so shallow, et cetera. So CPW had come forward with a project several years ago to rehabilitate the Werner and the other SWAs downstream from that. I'm taking that on as my personal challenge to try and encourage CPW to come back and see if we can find collaborative funding from both CPW and the WSRA to actually execute these projects that have been sitting fallow. I've been in touch with CPW several times, and there's often a hesitation to come back if you've had a project that's been rejected. I'm encouraging them to work with me to really make this happen. You may not know, in the North Platte Basin, there's really very limited public fishing access, and these SWAs are quite critical for that. Most of the fishing access is caught up by outfitters and by fishing clubs. So we have a lot of the green economy coming, but very little public fishing access. So that is the report. And I want to make a comment. I'm really delighted to see Ernest House Jr. Brought to the IBCC. I think tribal representation is really, really important. And I thank you for putting him on our commission. So thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Any questions for Barbara in the North Platte? Okay, seeing none. Stan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan. Stan Kazir on behalf of the Colorado River Basin. It seems like we've touched upon a lot of different issues, and as always, I appreciate it. You know, Lisa and Rick's work, and Jim always brings me up to date on the South Platte, and especially on the stuff that we don't see except in the newspapers. In my quote, or a couple of things. First of all, in the spirit of not letting any holiday go to waste, our chairman, Jason Turner has made sure we're going to have a meeting next Halloween to discuss our development procedures and how to move forward faster than what we're doing right now. Historically, actually, the Colorado River Basin has had a lot of smaller projects that they've been shooting through the CWCB one at a time, whether it's reinitiating of stream flows and doing things like that. And of course, up here, just by the nature of trans-mountain diversions and things like that, we were always having a lot of activity. As Jim noted, you can go see Chimney Hollow, if you want to, on something like that. But what you're seeing eventually is going to be water coming from over here. And as noted, the original Windy Gap Agreement, or the project, started about 1975 with lawsuits up and down. And basically, the original Windy Gap Agreement was 1980, modified in 85, Windy Gap Firming Project and agreement in 2012. We're finally getting to the spot where things are evening out. Learning by doing was a development in Western Colorado to try to acknowledge that there were so many dynamics with any water project that you had to address things as you went. Otherwise, what you judge today is not going to be what's happening in 10 years from now or otherwise. And the connectivity channel that we're all seeing down, if you drive by it on the Colorado River and the Fraser, is a direct result of trying to do the best that the participants can in trying to resolve west slope, east slope issues, in direct result of some good faith, hard fought negotiations since 1975. So that's one of the things that's really dynamic and it's happening. And I'm serious. We're going to have a meeting on Halloween, Next Steps Committee in the Colorado River Basin, to try to move everything forward faster. Our problem is that, as we were getting bits and pieces of everybody else's problems and developments, is over here, there's just not that much water in the headwaters. In the Colorado River Basin, there's not that much water. And of course, if everybody at this table is not uncomfortable with the status of the compact, they should be. Because even though we get great analysis and everything else, there are just some critical issues that are going to develop in the next 3 or 5 years. And it's going to affect everybody that uses Colorado River Basin water, and hope to heck we can have a solution to it. But, there's no great solutions jumping out at us right now. The other quick note for everybody is mentioning some of these things. In the 80s, as a direct result of what was a possible project on the East Slope that we cannot name anymore, get in trouble, the participants, particularly the West Slope, but also Denver Northern, looks very seriously on additional projects, Water and Power Development Authority over in Summit County, and also 365 projects in the Fraser Valley, none of which turned out to be feasible, which is one of the reasons why we ended up with Colorado River agreements, including the Clinton agreement itself. So I think we're doing the best we can with limited supplies and things that we're doing. And like I say, it feels sometimes like a Pavlovian dog. And one thing, you're trying to concentrate on what you can do in your basin. But, we have, the elephant in the room, which is what's happening, with respect to the compact and other issues that are going to jump out and create major questions. And we have questions every month on it right now. So that's about it, unless you have some questions.
Thanks, Stan. Appreciate that. Any questions for Stan in the Colorado River Basin? See none. Thanks a lot. Pat in the Arkansas.
Yeah, thank you. So I actually have the privilege of serving as the El Paso County representative to the South Platte Roundtable, as well as an IBCC appointment. And I would just like to say that I really applaud both the South Platte and the Metro for tackling these conservation questions. I think they are the top priority questions for municipal water providers throughout the state, around defining the value of landscapes and urban environments, trying to figure out how we can bring climate adaptable landscapes to bear for our future, and then focusing on how we transform existing landscapes within our communities to be more drought tolerant, use less less water and be more water wise. So as we saw the presentation flashed up, I think we really, Colorado Springs would be really interested in participating on the committee and would like to do what we can to even maybe lobby for the Arkansas Basin Roundtable to chip in and join in and make it, maybe even a front range sort of effort. So the other thing I wanted to mention, as an organization that is an owner of 3 asphalt face dams, I've got to tell you the asphalt core dams are the way to go. So if you get a chance to go tour Chimney Hollow, I think that would be a good move because asphalt doesn't like sunlight or water or ice. And then the only other thing that I would like to point out, something that that I'm proud of and we're proud of in Colorado Springs and in the Arkansas River Basin. We recently signed an intergovernmental agreement with Bent County, and this serves as an agreement in lieu of a 1041 permit that will allow us hopefully to develop up to 15,000 acre feet of average annual yield through water sharing agreements. And so this actually provides us a mitigation framework that addresses maintaining local economies, maintaining irrigated agriculture, and allowing us now to work with farmers through water sharing agreements to develop supplies. So we've actually implemented a couple small projects focused on irrigation efficiencies where we have helped young farmers convert from flood irrigation to center pivot irrigation. We are actually able to take the shares off the corners of those irrigated areas and transfer that to municipal use. And then we enter into 3 and 10 deals for the water on the circles. So we in the Arkansas Basin are looking for ways to meet the challenge around diversifying supply, around sharing water together, around finding win-win solutions. And we're optimistic that working with partners in the lower Arkansas Valley, working with county governments, such as the Bent County Commissioners and others, that we can find solutions to some of these challenges. So just wanted to point that out as something we're excited about.
Great, thanks, Pat. And let's move to folks that are online and we can start with the Arkansas. And I know we have Jairus has his famous witness protection screen on. And also we have Terry online as well. So either one of you, feel free to go when you're ready. Yeah, Jared, so it looks like you're ready. So you can start first, and then maybe Terry can go as well.
Sure. I appreciate Pat's summary of what's going on in some respects in the ARC. Just a couple of housekeeping items. At our last meeting, we had our annual election, and there's no change in leadership. Mark Shea is still our glorious leader. And we are desperately in need of a PEPO director. We had an excellent one in Paul Fanning. He's moved on to doing other things, and we're very much looking at trying to get someone because we had a very strong PEPO program under Paul. Just a couple of things. I will say, Dan, now that there's money available, it's really stimulated our water users to start looking at some projects. One that I think the roundtable is going to adopt as its #1 project is supporting the Arkansas Valley Conduit. Some of you may not be familiar with that, but this was an element of the Frying Pan Arkansas project back in the 70s that was never funded. And the idea is to bring good, high quality water from Pueblo Reservoir all the way down to Lamar through a conduit. This will benefit at least 40,000 residents in the valley who are now subsisting on uranium and selenium laden water. And we think this will be a major benefit for those people health-wise, but also it will, I think, lead to some economic development when people look at relocating to the Ark, one of the first things they look at is what's the water supply for the community that I'm going to move to. So we're excited about that. Also, we're looking at developing a major project on the lower Ark by upgrading diversion structures and gauging stations. This will enhance our irrigation efficiency substantially, and it also has compact implications. So there's a lot happening or about to happen in the Ark, and maybe Terry has some comments.
Yeah, thank you, Jairus. So far you've covered the fountain drainage, and we've covered the lower Arkansas. I'll kind of focus on the upper Ark area. A lot of the programs that we have going are feasibility studies for enlargement of Deweese Reservoir, and that's going really good. There's a water supply reserve fund that are being used in part for that feasibility study. The next phase is going to be moving into actually a little more exploration on being able to increase that capacity. That's about a 4,000 acre foot reservoir, and we think we can add up almost to 2,000 acre feet on top of it, 1,200 to 2,000 acre feet, with a very small, like a 4-foot rise in that dam. We're also doing, we just finished the feasibility phase on a new reservoir, a small reservoir in Custer County. Round Mountain Reservoir, working, Upper Ark is working with the Round Mountain Water and Sanitation District to help there. It'll also help with not only Round Mountain's water supply, meeting their demands on Grape Creek, but also Upper Arkansas District's blanket augmentation plan in the Custer County area. Further up in the basin, we're continuing to work on the alluvial storage project in near Buena Vista. That's looking more and more promising. Hopefully, before I retire in a few years, may even get that project off the ground. But that would allow us to store in the alluvium up to 10 to 15,000 acre foot of water. And I think that'll be very beneficial for all uses in the entire basin, especially the Upper Arkansas. There are several stream management projects that are moving forward. One is a study on the South Arkansas River. I think they're also looking at, there's an Upper Arkansas watershed collaborative that's actually working on looking at some of the tributaries in the upper basin for some stream management programs. I think those are very promising. Our district is working with River Science in the Fremont County area on a stream management on a project called the Van Norman Project, and that's moving on really well. We're learning a lot from that, how to do stream management projects without injuring water rights or being able to augment any of those potential injuries if they do occur. I think one of the other things is Jonathan Peckleon came on several months ago as our new ARWIC, our Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative coordinator. And he's been quite busy with a lot of folks who are wanting to need help with capacity to write grants and so forth. And I think it's a very promising. ARWIC has been very promising for the Arkansas Basin in that regard. I think Jairus mentioned there's a whole pile of money available, and trying to get capacity for grant writing is a challenge. And I think ARWIC is able to address that. We're also, I know that Sandy White, who's on our roundtable, is interested in working with some kind of capacity building for some of the small entities who don't have folks to be able to write grants. And I think that's an addendum to, would be an addendum to RWIC. That's about all we got going. I think everybody is, as mentioned, been mentioned before, in the Arkansas Basin, we're very concerned about the Colorado River. About 15% of our water comes from Trans Mountain water sources, Twin Lakes or Frying Pan Project in particular, to mention two, the larger ones. This year, we've been very fortunate with the rain that we've got and the marginal snowpack. We actually ended up being a fairly good irrigation year. In the upper basin, on average, the river call in the Arkansas River is a December 1884 call, and it's pretty much stayed there almost all year, which is pretty much an average year for us. I think that was quite fortunate. And I know there are some drier areas, but going into this year, we thought, at least I did, thought that, oh boy, this is going to be another one of those really bad dry years. And it actually turned out to be a relatively good year for us as far as irrigation is concerned. That's about all I have. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer any of those.
Great. Thanks so much for those updates. I do have a question. Jairus, you mentioned, I guess, the excitement in the basin over funding, and I just want to make sure everyone knows of some of the major announcement, frankly, that occurred last week. So as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, otherwise known as the infrastructure bill, the Arkansas Valley Conduit Project was awarded $60 million. And that, of course, helps the about 130 million or 130 mile pipeline that will help provide clean water for about 50,000 people and includes about 40 different communities. So that's significant and that's really amazing. But my question is, how are you all prioritizing that funding? And you know, are you working closely with the feds on that since it's federal money? And just, you know, how are you going about that process to make sure you make sure that it's used in the areas that are most needed?
Excellent point, Dan. Yeah, we're starting talking with Southeast District, since they're the lead agency on the conduit. We don't want to be stepping on any toes, but we do know that many of those small communities are totally cash strapped. They just don't have revenue. And so we're going to try and focus on those small entities that we think we can help with either statewide money or with water supply reserve account. So we're working with the Bureau, working with Southeast, and then we'll identify those entities, and we know they're there, that are going to need help.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, next up, let's move to the Gunnison Basin. And I believe that we have Joanne with us, or Mark. Okay, Joanne's online. There we go.
Yep.
The floor.
Don't have a lot to report. We've been working on getting funds out to the projects that have been working to get prepared to get stuff done. A lot of the focus has been on working on replacing pipes in some of the reservoirs on Grand Mesa and up the North Fork. They've been doing a lot of pipe bursting, pipe lining as a way to keep the Gunnison Basin's primary #1 goal is to not lose anything. And the pipe projects have been a way to keep a lot of the reservoirs that had pipes that were past their useful life going. And actually, in a lot of cases with the lining, the capacity of the pipe actually improves compared to the old rusty iron pipes. We're also, there's been some turnover in the PEPO committee, but the River District and a couple of the newer members on the roundtable are trying to take it over and doing a lot of outreach. And we've also been working on getting a lot of the school kids involved and getting them to the water center in Grand Junction as part of the trying to bring the next generation to an understanding of what's going on with water. I think, like everybody else, we're real concerned about what's going on in the Big River and with the local reservoirs. I think that's the bulk of what's been going on the last few meetings.
Great, thanks, Joanne. Any questions? Joanne, okay. See none, let's move to the Rio, and I believe Nathan is online.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, just a second. Let me fix my camera. Well, you don't need to see me. There's nothing to see here. In the Rio Grande, we've been really active. We took your challenge, excuse me, we took your challenge to heart on getting some projects done. Right now we're working on some river restoration projects, and like other areas in the state, stream flow and snowpack forecasting is huge for us. We are also doing a project to improve our ability to use the locally built radar, that partnership to improve meltout forecasting on a weekly basis. We're trying to get better at acknowledging what we're doing there. We, as most of you know, we have a very strict compact with New Mexico on the Rio Grande. And so everything we do comes almost in second place to how it would affect the compact. So we try to be very cognizant of staying in compliance there. Another priority in our basin that we've been working on and having a lot of success lately is in storage. We recognize that we're going to have to take advantage of kind of the feast and famine opportunities we have. San Luis Valley Water Conservancy District, Heather Dunn, they just were able to purchase and make partnerships with Shaw Reservoir, which is a pre-compact facility, make big inroads for our opportunities on the northern end. The Conness Water Conservancy District is advancing the ability to build a new reservoir that could service off the Conneos, San Antonio, and Los Pinos rivers. And so we've got some big projects, we've got some standard projects moving forward, but overall, I'd say the strength of our executive committee within the roundtable is really key. It reaches out, we reach out very well to projects and the people trying to promote these projects to help navigate them through the system. I think right now we're trying to finish up strong on the year and keep going. We're glad we got some snow finally. Help us out. It's the lifeblood. So that's all we have, unless anybody has any questions.
Any questions for Nathan? Great, thanks for those updates. Appreciate it. Let's move to the Southwest. And I see Ken Curtis online. I think Al may be there as well. So whoever wants to start, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Al Pfister, San Juan Water Conservancy District. And I guess one of the, I'll say, things we've been working on lately is a revision of our bylaws. You know, we had elections in July like the rest of folks, and none of that changed. We do have a really active PEPO program that is being collectively supported throughout the basin. As far as your challenge, we have had one, I'll say, subcommittee meeting that we discussed how we are going to approach that on a basin, and we have our roundtable meeting coming up this Thursday that we were going to work out more details, see if how the roundtable wanted to approach it as a whole, or just leave it up to the subcommittee of about 5 people. So we're working on it and looking forward to implementing some projects. We're already have quite a few projects that the basin is undertaking. We have 5 projects that we'll be reviewing at the meeting on Thursday for funding. And I guess other things going on is, well, we've been getting some good moisture too. But another thing going on here in the Southwest is the
CFLRP, the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program, which is under the leadership of the U.S. Forest Service, and looking at different efforts throughout different basins in our basin to implement various restoration projects. I've sat in on a few of their meetings, and it's I'll say interesting and challenging that, operating under the procedures that they're operating under, it makes it a little cumbersome, but they are moving forward. And I would say I see good potential in what they're going to be able to implement, because they have quite a bit of money that they can do some projects there. And as we all know, our water comes from the forest. So it'll be interesting to see how they proceed. And I guess one thing we're facing on this eastern side of the basin is trying to keep water from going over to the other side of the Rockies. The San Juan Chama project takes quite a bit of water, 85 to 100,000 acre feet. And we've got a couple requests for additional diversions up at Wolf Creek Pass. So I guess, and then like others, we have a pretty good number of stream management plans / integrated water management plans going on. And I think they're making very good progress. And here in ours, we're implementing projects. Another one in the Mancos, they're doing a lot of good things, as well as the San Miguel. So I guess that's about it. And well, I guess Ken is very heavily involved in the aerial snow observatory efforts. And I just occasionally join in on those. I think that's a great technology that he has been more involved with, and they utilize it more than we do over here. But so Ken, I'll turn it over to you if you want to add anything on aerial snow observatory or anything going over on the west side of the basin.
Sure. Thanks, Al. Everybody, good morning still. Fall hit hard 2:30 a.m. Sunday. We did start to see heavy frost after that. So the rain has been great. We've had a wonderful month of viewing the color up in the high country. I think everybody's taking a break to enjoy that. The cattle are all moving down, and the irrigation season's winding up. I'm sure any manager who's running a project realizes what a relief that is. As was stated, the monsoons were good. Did catch a lot of hay down. The net effect was we actually have more carryover this year than we've had for about 3 years. Everybody's leaving a little water in the reservoir, which is kind of it's good, but it kind of relates to how you recover from the prior year's droughts. The Utes are winding up irrigation at the end of the month. Like all the other farmers, it did turn out to be a little bit better runoff year. We thought it was going to be down in the 20% and ended up about 40%. But when you make farm plans, it's kind of hard to change on the fly. In the Utes case, they have planted many acres of wheat, few thousand, just in the last 8 weeks to get that up and watered and harvest that for a local mill. So people are responding. I think drought resilience is the name of the game down here in the Southwest. And beyond that, I would say 2 things. We are looking at the hydrology forecasting, as Tom pointed out. We're seeing that it's not, the historical records aren't what they were. So we have been very active in ASO and other soil moisture and other the WRF hydro work out of NCAR. So we're trying to up those forecast games. As Tom pointed out, if you have a reservoir, it's really hard to fill, and it drives a lot of our water deliveries. beyond that, as large organizations, infrastructure doesn't take a time out, even though you're responding to the drought. The Utes, for their case, they initiated their hydropower on their pivots. Thanks for the CWCB board and yourself, Dan, coming down to cut that ribbon, as it were, with Chairman Hart. That's been a multi-year project trying to get that hydropower up and running, driving some of those Ute pivots. And so it's going to have a long-term payoff for them and be a good thing. But they're also having to deal with the lack of water. Beyond that, our local senior water rights have a project up for review on Thursday. They continue to upgrade infrastructure, including a guard gate at Groundhog Reservoir that should be done before too much more snow hits. Likewise, we continue with upgrades to our infrastructure within the Dolores project. So juggling drought and lack of water and lack of revenue on top of long-term projects has been a challenge. But as Al pointed out, we have had stream management plans across the basin, and they're starting to turn in projects. So I think they're going well. Sometimes it's a little hard for us to focus on a single project, as we do have the 9 sub-basins, and we're all very active in our local groups and work well as a roundtable, but always don't have time to go over the hill and see what the neighbor's doing. So we'll keep going at it. And with the recent monsoons and the snow, we're hopeful for next year, and we'll keep supporting our partners within the Dolores Basin and outside. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Alan, Ken. Appreciate those updates. A lot going on. Any questions for them at the Southwest? Okay. And Ken, I just want to say thanks so much for helping to facilitate the tour when we were down there with CWCB. It was really amazing to see, McPhee Reservoir and kind of the delivery flows, and then be later on at the Ute Mountain Ute Tribal Park to have a good understanding of the agricultural needs on that landscape and what's being done there. And it's just really amazing to see, on the ground projects getting done. So thank you. Okay, next let's move to governor appointees, and we'll start with Aaron, who's in the room, and then we'll move to folks that are online. Aaron.
Thanks, Dan. So trying to provide a bit of a statewide perspective, I wanted to call out our last meeting, we were all eagerly anticipating the release of the water plan, and now we've seen the release of the water plan. I noticed that Russ is not here. I imagine he's deep in reviewing comments and then hopefully can hibernate for a couple months. But wanted to really thank all the staff for the enormous effort that is ongoing on that work. And it connects, I think, a little bit. I remember in one of Amy's slides, she in maybe one of the 4th or 5th pillars, it talks about intrastate conservation and drought efforts. And I know that's a real central pillar of the water plan. So eager to see how that gets implemented and how those efforts kind of come together. Also, I think Tom, called out some of the importance of bringing in additional funding, which I know is also on Amy's slide, for monitoring and measurement. I think that's IIJA funding, but recognizing how important it's going to be for the state to do a better job at tracking all of its water, especially as we're seeing less of it. So really happy to see that on the radar. One kind of personal anecdote I wanted to quickly share. The Nature Conservancy Colorado chapter just had our first in-person retreat in 2-3 years. We went down to the Zapata Ranch in the San Luis Valley, which is a property the Nature Conservancy owns, and we're able to share with some of the other staff, a lot of new staff who had never been down there, the kind of history of conservation, water use, and groundwater management in the valley. So it was really nice to share with a bunch of our new staff in particular. Unfortunately, this isn't a story that's in the past. It continues to be an issue in that area, but part of the reason we have a Great Sand Dunes National Park is because of historic attempts to take groundwater from the valley, and the community coming together and saying, no, we want to protect this resource for agricultural production, for communities, and for the really unique environmental values it provides. So it was really nice to get out there and celebrate a bit of that story. And we're actually going to be taking with Senator Simpson and Senator Lundeen, and I think some other folks, a flyover of the San Luis Valley to talk about water. I know we're all focused on the Colorado River, as we should be, but also making sure that we tell that story as well. Following up on the, I think, $60 million investment from the legislature to help the San Luis Valley and Republican River Basin address groundwater decline. So really exciting to bring more people into that room. It's not on national news, for better or for worse, but that's a story that I think we need to keep telling. And that community of water users has really come together to do whatever they can to try and protect that really unique resource. So I was happy to bring the Nature Conservancy folks to discuss that. I think I'll pass and let another governor appointee jump in.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. Okay, I'll just go by the list I have in front of me, and we'll move next to our newest member, Ernest House, and then move to Bo Schaefer and then Andy Mueller.
Thanks, Director Gibbs. Since this is my first meeting, I don't have very much to add other than it's been great to hear these basin updates, and I'll look forward to following up with Ken and Al, particularly about the Southwest, as that's an area that I'm particularly familiar with. But I think I did want to bring up a couple things. One, to thank CWCB and those involved in coordinating the meeting with Simon Martinez and the project, the hydropower project out at the Ute Mountain Farm and Ranch. And actually, that's also to extend an invitation to folks in this group. If you've never been to the Ute Mountain Farm and Ranch enterprise, please let me know. I would love to coordinate that tour or that visit. I know the tribe would be honored to have anyone out there to learn more about our 7,000 acre ranch and what we do out there. So please keep that in mind. Another thing I wanted to bring up was both of our tribes, the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, which I'm a member of, and then our sister tribe, the Southern Indian tribe. Obviously, in this format, I don't represent the tribes. I'm a member of one of those tribes, but I do talk with them quite a bit. I still talk with their water representation, and especially at Ute Mountain, we just recently had a tribal election. We have elections every year as well. On October 14th, the Ute Mountain Ute tribe re-elected Manuel Hart to another 3-year term. I think that's important to note because Chairman Hart has been very involved in water management. And I think Ken said it best with drought resilience in the Southwest and what the future holds for the Ute Mountain Ute tribe in terms of water rights, and then also their involvement with the 10 Tribes Water Group, which is the group that's come together on the Colorado River to discuss tribal water rights. So I think as you all are hearing this play out, and it's been said numerous times about the importance of the Colorado River in this conversation, and somebody else has also brought forward the importance of the tribal component and the tribal voice being important at this table as well. So just know that I hope to reach out to them, bring that information here forward as I can, or even have their water representation do that themselves. I work really closely with Mike Preston, who many of you know as well, and sit on another board for the Ute Mountain Ute tribe in that capacity with him. The Southern Indian tribe has their tribal elections coming up November 4th. And so I'm happy to bring the next updates as we look forward to there. But again, I think just the biggest impact is if there's a way or biggest opportunity, if I can help coordinate visits down to either Ute Mountain or Southern Ute, I'm happy to do that. And then also happy to pass this information along that I gained here from you all over to their tribal leaderships as well. I'll go ahead and end with there unless anybody has any additional questions. And thanks again for the opportunity just to provide some feedback.
Great. Thank you, Ernest. Appreciate that. Any questions for Ernest? And thanks for the invitation for tours. It was really amazing to head down there last month. I learned a lot. Okay, let's move to Bo Schaefer and then Annie Mueller and then Melly Whiting.
Yeah, good afternoon now, everyone. I'd like to address basically the call to action. What I personally have been doing for that, I focus on education. I've been supporting the Water Education Network. Also, I'm running for local office and trying to bring my expertise in water as a water consultant into local government, because I feel that water is one of the most important issues facing all of us these days and the various aspects of water. You may notice, if you've seen the latest drought maps, we in the mountains are no longer in drought. The only part of the state that's not is in the mountains. We are going to end up being the stewards of water, because the water all comes from here. And depending upon how much we get is how much can go in places. We are already tightening our belts in the upper basin here. I mean, we've been doing it for years. I've been here for almost 40 years now, and I've seen how people are here. They're very water conservation minded. Down in Denver, even, they've already passed ordinances against having turf in new developments. I just went and checked on Las Vegas, for example. Las Vegas has such an ordinance, but it doesn't go into effect until 2027. I don't find that to be effective right now. We are the stewards up here, but we can't do a whole lot more to change things. The change has to come from the southern basin, from the lower basin. They're the ones that I don't see a whole lot of conservation going on. They're kind of starting it, but when they put it out for 5 years, that doesn't tell me they see the urgency of it that we see up here. So in the end, I mean, there are some things you can do. I lived in a city in California during the 80s when they had severe drought out there, and that city cut its consumption of water by 2/3. Just using voluntary tactics, about a half a dozen things, like putting a brick in the toilet, by shutting off your shower while you're soaping up and then rinsing. I mean, nothing too bad, but kind of conservation techniques that every person can use. And just think, if every person in Las Vegas, in Los Angeles, in all these big cities, if every one of these people could follow something like that and cut their consumption maybe even by a quarter or half, that would solve the problem. Anyway, that's my whole focus is education, through government, through online forums, through whatever I can to try to educate people. And I think that's the key to saving us up here in the basin, is that the lower basin gets some kind of a program that everybody can start to conserve water. That's all I have to say. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.
Great, thanks, Bo. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move to Andy Mueller and then to Melly Whiting.
Yeah, Dan, I appreciate it. Apologize, I'm not able to be there in person. I am fighting off some kind of virus, so better not spread it to everybody else. I appreciate everybody's comments, and I honestly don't have anything to add, so we'll just pass it right along to Melly. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Let's move over to Melly.
Thank you, Dan. And I also apologize for not being there. And I'm going to be also very brief so people can go and have some lunch. Just one thing I wanted to mention, just touching back on a couple of themes, I guess, that we've had today. Just wanted to mention the Upper San Juan Enhancement Partnership, which is a local Upper San Juan stakeholder group that formed to create a stream management plan, which morphed into a integrated management plan, water management plan. We were able to get money from the Bureau of Reclamation to hire a coordinator, and are in the process of hiring a coordinator. This group that got together to do some planning wanted to stay together and actually just implement some of those projects that we identified through the planning process. And there was no way that they were able to do that. I'm involved, but almost outside the scope of what I usually do. And I don't have time for it. And others are in the same situation, as mostly volunteers that are working on this. So having a coordinator that can help us write grants, that can help us organize, that can oversee the projects that we get involved, write RFPs, hire contractors, do all those things, I think it's just really critical. So it's not only do we, we created a system here that will generate more projects, and not just environmental and recreation, but also agriculture and municipal projects. So I just wanted to share that, and just the importance of having that that centerpiece, the coordinator that can organize these efforts, and then you multiply those projects well beyond where the what the roundtable can accomplish. The other thing I wanted to mention that I've been involved in, and I think it's, it's in its early stages, but I think it's very important, ties back to not sending water to to the lower basin, but just learning how to do with less water and keep agriculture viable. And that is looking at alternative crops. I'm involved with others in a little bit of poking around to see the viability of other crops and their ability to save some water and surviving in very extreme drought conditions. And I'm very excited about that. Something that I think we need to do more of, as finding other alternatives to simply dry up even temporarily. It's just coming up with a better way to continue irrigating and producing food with less water. I'm sure it's not the first effort ever done, but I'm pretty excited about it. So I wanted to share that as well. And I will leave it at that unless there are any questions.
Great. Thanks, Melly. Any questions? Okay, I don't think online either. Okay, yeah, well, thanks so much. Thanks for those updates. It's really, I love hearing what's going on the ground, and especially hearing the charge I've given you and how you've really embraced that, and really looking at, how you can be helpful to get projects off the ground in your backyard. You're either you're sitting here or online because you're either elected by your basins, people think very highly of you, or the governor also thinks highly of you and views you as a statewide water leader. So this is a really unique group in the state. And I know you take your role very seriously, sitting around this table or online. So the work you do to get projects off the ground is really important. And if me or my team can be helpful in that process, in the charge I've given you, please let us know. But really appreciate these updates. They're really important. So we're a little bit behind schedule. So what I propose is we take about a 15-minute break, grab some lunch, and kind of have like a working lunch. Does that sound good? And then Lauren and Nate can give us an overview of kind of the state and federal funding, and then we'll still be probably a little bit behind schedule, but not as much. Does that sound good, everyone? Okay, we'll take about a 15-minute break or so and come back about 12:30. Thanks, everyone. Can you hear? Okay, testing. Okay, let's get started. We're just having a working lunch, and first of all, I want to welcome Mark Rober here, representing the Gunnison Basin, and former county commissioner and friend. Good to see you, Mark. Thanks for making the trip. We appreciate that. And the next item that we have here is we've had a lot of discussion on, really recognizing that we're in a unique point in time, really, where we're seeing both state and federal funding coming our way for water projects. And so next, and really, how does that tie into capacity building too, around the state? So we have both Nate Pearson and Lauren Riss with us to give us an overview of kind of what the landscape looks like for both state and federal. And we're going to start first with Nate. Nate is my Chief Recovery Director for the Department of Natural Resources, and previously worked in the governor's office for OSPB. So Nate, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours, and then we'll turn it over to Lauren.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, and good to see everyone virtually. At least I was looking forward to being up there in Winter Park with you all, but woke up with a nasty cold this morning, so joining virtually. And so I will limit my conversation sort of specifically to capacity building around, accessing and making the most of federal investment right now. But I'm happy to answer questions about, anything sort of in the recovery realm. The DNR and CWCB are managing some federal funds that sort of fall outside of the scope of capacity building, but still may be of interest to this group. So happy to answer any questions. So as it relates to capacity building, I think as I've discussed with you all before, over the course of the last year in working with you all and stakeholders from across the state, identified the capacity of our local governments, nonprofits, watershed groups all over the state, identified the capacity or lack thereof to apply for federal grants and manage them as one of the biggest gaps in our ability to be successful with this historic investment of federal funds. And so, along with partners at the General Assembly, passed House Bill 1379 last spring. That provided, among other things, $5 million for the CWCB to award to local governments and other groups around the state to add that capacity. And so that $5 million is further cut in half. So $2.5 million for direct cash grants, folks to either directly hire staff or directly hire contractors. The other half will be used for the CWCB to hire a centralized contractor whose time can be granted out to organizations that apply. And so there's been a lot of progress since that bill passed. Over the summer, there's quite a bit of back-end work. So this is money being managed by the US Treasury. We had to go through a formal eligibility process with them, which we successfully managed. But so earlier this fall, the first half of the grant program, which is the direct cash grants, launched. You can find that linked on the CWCB website. And the second half of that program, the central contractor, will be launching in November. An RFP was issued, a contractor has been selected and will be brought on board. And then the entire grant program will be available in November. At that time, we expect there'll be sort of a big communications push to get it in front of as many folks as we can, including you and folks in all of your basins. So we look forward to the hopefully a flood of applications and a lot of good work that money can do. I think you may all be aware that the Colorado River District launched a similar program over the summer that had really, really great response. And so, we have, every indication is that this will be a really necessary and well-received program. So with that, happy to answer any questions about capacity building or anything else related to federal funds. And otherwise, I'll pass it to Lauren.
Okay, questions for Nate in the room first. We'll see, and there may be some questions after Lauren as well. Let's see here online. I don't see anyone right now. But Nate, are there any, I know you've been working really hard to look at, there's so much that the feds are still really understanding and figuring out like how the funds are going to be dispersed. It'll be formula or whatever it may be, but are there any key funding possibilities for Colorado that we're still kind of waiting for some guidance on that we should be anxiously kind of waiting for? Any big ticket items?
So I think the biggest ticket of them all, you all discussed already with Amy earlier on, and that's the drought funding and the Inflation Reduction Act, $4 billion. There was an announcement. So Amy mentioned the RFP that was issued for lower basin projects. During that announcement, the Bureau also made a statement that 500 million of that 4 billion for drought funds will be dedicated to the upper Colorado River Basin. And there's not a lot of specifics tied to that. And I think Amy and others at CWCB are maybe better positioned to answer specific questions about that. But that's the biggest ticket item. I think otherwise, there's quite a lot from the infrastructure bill that is starting to come online a lot in the watershed space, as well as small storage projects. And so I think the launch, the full launch of our state capacity grant program, I think, is well timed with a lot of opportunities at the federal level that are starting to trickle out after the bill. It's sort of in full implementation phase now.
Great. Thanks, Nate. Aaron has a question.
Hey, Nate, this is Aaron Citron. In addition to the capacity funding bill, there was also the big IIJA cash fund bill. And I'm curious if there's been any progress made on identifying water projects that might receive some money from the state IIJA cash fund. I know we've talked about this before. I've never been quite clear on the process.
So yeah, absolutely. So just to be sure I'm answering the right question, you're talking about Senate Bill 215, which is matching funds for IIJA projects.
That sounds right. I don't remember the number anymore, but yes, I think it was 215 that set aside a certain amount of money that, and one of the purposes of that would be to match projects for something like water, watershed. I can't remember the terminology, but yes.
Yeah. So as Aaron referenced, there was a bill last year that set aside, I think the total number is $80 million that's being managed by the governor's office to serve as the matching, the non-federal match for a wide variety of projects. That funding is limited to state agencies and local governments. So unfortunately, nonprofits and other groups are excluded from eligibility for that. But the governor's office has stood up that grant program. I think there's information on their website for local governments and state agencies to apply with those project ideas. The big water match that I know has moved forward is for CDPHE and their state revolving funds, which end up dispersed across the state. But there's the funding from the infrastructure bill related to the state revolving funds was a formula grant, and so that money flows to CDPHE and the Water and Power Authority to then be granted out throughout the state. The state is responsible for meeting the matching requirement associated with that. And as I understand it, the governor's office has worked with CDPHE to fulfill that, at least the first year of that matching requirement. And I think otherwise, the system is set up such that the governor's office will process requests from local governments relating to water infrastructure as they come in.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, good question. Other questions for Nate? Okay, let's move to Lauren Riss now, Deputy Director of the Water Conservation Board.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I guess before I touch on some of CWCB specific grant and funding programs, just to provide a little bit of detail to one of the items Nate referenced, which is the funding from 1379, which is the ARPA funding that CWCB received $5 million for capacity building, and Nate described how that's broken into two parts, both grants for grantees to hire their own contractors, and then technical assistance that would be provided within CWCB. We are on the cusp of getting a contract together, and so we'll have that service available. Our target date is by November, so we're coming up quick on that. So stay tuned. Everything will be posted on our website. The capacity building grants to go directly to grantees is already available. You can apply for that through our grant portal, and all the information for that is on our website. The other ARPA funding that CWCB received was for our watershed restoration grant program, which was $10 million that we're planning on doing a special release for. So that would be basically a separate program. We're hoping that that'll be available this fall. There will be a minimum 25% match that'll be required for capacity building and planning, and then a 50% match for construction projects, implementation grants. And those will be awarded on a rolling basis through December 2024. And then we have to have all of that funding expended by December 2026, which is a requirement of the federal funding. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up shortly too. Also, just a quick update on water plan grant application deadlines. We have another round of applications that are due on December 1st, and awards will be made in March. We have about $7 million available that's remaining for this fiscal year. And just a reminder, that funding comes from sports betting and from our construction fund. We had a really good response for our first grant round and expect to get a similarly competitive round together for the December 1st deadline. I think I also mentioned at our last IBCC meeting that we are reopening the statewide account for WSRF. Our board approved a transfer of around $11 million that'll go into the statewide account. And our board just approved the updated guidelines for that at our last board meeting in September. Those funds will be focused on aging infrastructure and drought resilience. The guidelines are up on our website. And the statewide requests can begin as early as December 1st. So just a reminder for that account, first has to receive approval from Basin Roundtables before it gets to the CWCB. So check in with the Basin Roundtable and follow their grant schedule for anybody who's listening. But we're ready to start processing those December 1st. So that's pretty exciting. I think that's all the other update I wanted to give was on our regional grant manager positions. I think I mentioned that we were moving forward with that at our last meeting. We have tentative offers that have been accepted for all of those positions, and we're really excited to be able to announce those as soon as it's public. But we have regional grant managers that'll be starting in the Southwest, and then the South Platte Metro and North Platte, the Arkansas, and then the Colorado River Basin. So those will be primarily focused on the water plan grant program and trying to identify projects on the front end and really work with applicants to put together strong applications. And then we'll be managing that process from the CWCB on the back end, including invoicing and reporting and all of that. So that will be coming soon too. I think that's it.
Okay, any questions for Lauren or previously with Nate? Yeah, Lisa.
Excuse me, Lauren, PEPO also received some additional funds. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the full WSRF transfer was 17 million. I think it was 11.4 went into the statewide account, and then all of the basin accounts were bumped up to $1 million. And PEPO also is slated to receive $1 million as well. That's correct.
Good news, definitely. Okay, any more questions? Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks so much. I know we've had a lot of internal discussions about, funding and capacity and so forth. And now let's move to capacity and really hear about some really important projects that are getting done around the state. And we have a group of panelists. First, we'll hear from Greg Peterson, and then we'll hear from Heather Dutton, and then Carol Akarius will join us as well. And Carol is here. So we'll just go in that order with Greg, Heather, and then Carol. And Greg, whenever you're ready.
All right. Can you actually hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Wow, this worked. Okay, well, I appreciate you working with me. I am talking to you from Aaron Wilson's car as we sit right next to Blue Mesa Reservoir. The reservoir is low and there's snow on the ground, so that's your water and snow report from here. Well, thank you for giving me a chance to talk. I just want to touch on this topic of capacity building and this one federal program that we're working quite a bit with now at the moment. I think hopefully we'll do this well. My slides are up, and if we can go to the second slide, there's a little comic on there, and we've been really getting involved with this program, and quite a few people in the state have, called PL 566 Watershed Protection Program. And it's actually been around for decades. It's one of NRCS's oldest programs. And it's in the past few years, it's gotten quite a significant amount of federal funding. And it seems to be a very good tool to address some of these large scale infrastructure projects that we're dealing with. I mean, if you're looking at one diversion ditch or one small project, it's definitely not appropriate for that. Really, anything under $5 million isn't worth it. And at the moment, you can access up to $25 million in federal funding through the program. It's a bit different from other NRCS programs in the sense that if you're using under $25 million in federal funding, it requires an environmental assessment. A lot of the work, the environmental assessment, this cost benefit analysis, engineering design, all of that is done by contractors outside of NRCS, IDIQ contractors. And so that can speed up the process a little bit comparatively to other programs like EQIP, but it's still a long process. I mean, right now, when you begin this process, you start with just a letter to NRCS, the state office, requesting funding. And then there's a cost benefit analysis that can take 3 to 6 months. Then the EA, which hopefully can take 18 months to 2 years. Then you can be approved for design funding. And then after that, then you're approved for construction funding. So this is definitely a long-term process. And that can fit well with some larger projects. And we've seen this in other parts of the country, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where they've modernized entire irrigation districts. And modernized can mean a lot of different words and what you need, whether it's piping, lining, ditches, diversion structures, head gates, automation, SCADA, new storage, rehabilitating storage. There's a lot on the table with this program, but it is a lot of work. And even just getting prospective projects together takes time, and especially with the sponsors of these projects. And that's something that we're working with right now is on projects, is really trying to support sponsors and ditch companies and districts early on through this process so that they can hopefully successfully navigate it and apply for funding. If you go to the next slide, there's a chart, and just briefly, for a lot of the projects, especially agricultural projects, the cost share is pretty generous. Often 100% of the planning and engineering, up to 75% of the construction. There isn't a better game in town than this. For a lot, whether it's if you want to pipe an entire ditch system, repair an old reservoir, this is a really good option that we're looking at for a lot of our programs. And just to go in, there's a lot of other purposes that this program can be used for outside of agricultural water management: watershed protection, flood prevention, recreation, fish and wildlife, water quality management. So if you go into that next slide, it'll say PL 566 authorized purposes. Okay. And it'll list all those purposes, and that's all that's acceptable under the program. And then if we'll go to the next slide, just specifically, as I mentioned, in agricultural water management, there's a wide variety of practices that we can do. So we'll jump one more slide. So really, where does this fit into capacity building? And like I said, it's a lot of work. And right now, there's a lot of these projects going on throughout the state. Ourselves, Colorado Cattlemen's, and a group called Farmers Conservation Alliance out of Oregon, which has done about 30 of these. We're working together with local projects, just identifying projects, getting them ready to apply for this process. And to do that, we're leaning heavily on the River District's Accelerator Grant, CWCB's Federal Technical Assistance Grants, and the TAP-C grants that they've had in the past to really fund a lot of, whether it's a conservation district or ourselves, to help do this initial work. And for example, in one area, one of the conservation districts that we're working with, that'll be a sponsor for one of these projects, they've got 2 part-time staff members, and for the next few years, they're going to be full-time staff members. And we're relying on these state grants to bridge us until hopefully they can be approved for that PL 566 funding that can be then hopefully used to help, that they can pay for them to help facilitate that project, because it will be quite a bit of work on their end, especially with the sponsors. This program was originally designed for irrigation districts where the sponsors are also own the infrastructure, and that can work here in Colorado, but in a lot of places most common sponsors in Colorado are conservation and conservancy districts, and they don't necessarily own all of the infrastructure that the work is being done on. And so it can be a lot of work on the sponsor's part to channel funds and communicate with the actual water right owners of these projects. And so it's not for the faint of heart. And it definitely need to make sure that they have the ability and the capacity to facilitate all these other people under the umbrella of their sponsorship. I mean, there's still, when you're talking about a $25 million project and there's still 25% that you have to bring to the table, that's a lot of money. And already kind of working with our local sponsors and trying to identify where's this match going to come from, and most likely multi-beneficial projects, and trying to identify what can we get out of, what other water users can get out of these agricultural projects. The pre-development work that we've been focusing on right now with sponsors, it really allows us to look at, okay, what's a conceptual design of your project? What data do all these ditches have that isn't written down anywhere, but in maybe their ditch writer's head, and we have to get all that information, and that takes staff, that takes hours, and that's where the River District's Accelerator Grant and these CWCB, TAFC, or Technical Assistant Grants are really helping us out with us being able to do that pre-development work so that we can actually apply and have a good idea of conceptually what are the problems in these systems. We're running across some groups where they have all this information, and some of them, no one has that information except the ditch writer. And so that does take some work to really put together a competitive application, because that first part of the application process for this program is a cost benefit analysis, and your project has to meet a cost benefit of either 1 or greater. And that can take a lot of info. I mean, the costs are easy to add up, but really the benefits, whether it's lost agricultural production, lost acreage, what about environmental benefits? How do we put a price on this? That takes a lot of work, so it's definitely not something that you can easily pull together. If we can jump to the next slide. So just to give people an idea of what is going on with this program and how active it is throughout the state. Map of the state, and right now there's actually quite a few projects that are already being funded and they're in different stages. The cost benefit analysis is also called this PIFR, PIFR. And quite a few of the projects are in that phase right now. And if they pass that, then they go and get planning and engineering money. And we have a couple of projects there. And then after that, again, they go to construction. Right now, I believe we only have one project in the state, the Windy Gap Bypass Project up in Grand County, that is that far along in the process. But already there's quite a few people that are in different phases. And then if we jump to the next slide, all these other black stars are showing you, here's all of these other projects right now that are at the beginning of the process, whether they're requesting funds for that cost benefit analysis, or they're working on pre-development work to get there. And so there is quite a bit of interest in Colorado and also throughout the West, but in the rest of the country, I mean, and back east, they're really looking at this for watershed flood prevention. Out here, it's more on the supply side. So, and if we can just jump one more slide. So right now, there's a pretty concerted effort at the federal level to expand support for this program, because already, I mean, there is no there's no grading process for these projects. That there's no way that they decide one or the other. And probably within 5 years, there's going to be much more demand than there actually is funding for. At the moment, it's looking like there's going to be a couple of changes. Right now, the federal share can be up to $25 million without an EIS, or with only doing an environmental assessment. If you go over that, you have to do an EIS. It looks like that's going to change to $50 million. largely due to inflation. There's a lot of push asking for a larger annual appropriation and also to streamline the program down to 18 months to 2 years. So like I mentioned, it's quite the gauntlet, and it seems like for a lot of the projects that we're working with throughout the state, it's the best and only opportunity we have to repair some of this aging infrastructure. But what I've been learning is probably the most two critical elements is that you've got motivated people motivated water right owners that want to do this, and that you have a sponsor that actually has the capacity to do it. And I mean, in some places, like it can be really tough trying to find that sponsor because it has to be a government entity. And so conservancy districts, conservation districts, those are all on the table, but it is a fair amount of work. And at the moment, relying on programs like the Accelerator Grant and TAFC or Technical Assistance Grant, that seems to really help us be able to bridge the gap to when to that cost benefit analysis where it's actually going to be approved. And that seems to be working right now at the moment, but it's definitely like I wouldn't just jump into this process. We're right now involved in about 6 of these projects, just helping sponsors identify projects and get ready for pre-development. But you've got quite a few people throughout the state who are on their own. And so that if anybody has any interest, feel free to reach out to me. I know another good contact is Blongxia Cha, or B. She's really the head of this program at NRCS at the state office, and she can answer any of your questions about this. Well, just again, thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. Any questions for Greg before we move to our next panelist? And I forgot to mention that Greg is with the Colorado Agriculture Water Alliance. Okay, let's move to Heather Dutton. And
hey guys,
you know Heather? Heather's with the San Luis Valley Water Conservancy District and also CWCB board member. So Heather, the floor is yours.
thanks Dan, and thanks for making it available virtually. I noticed Viola cruising around, and then all of the amazing people with the audio visual, I can't say that word today, team. Yeah, just super impressive that we've figured out how to move around the state and have meetings where people in person and online can have a really good experience. So thanks Dan for making that a priority, and thanks to CWCB for keeping up that awesome work. Yeah, so I wanted to come. I appreciated Jim noting that, he likes to tell the story of the South Platte, and you guys know that I'm always excited to tell a story about the Rio Grande. And just, I think when Russ and Kat asked me if I would attend this meeting and visit about our experience, it was really to share and kind of answer or maybe provide our perspective on this question that I heard at the June IBCC meeting, and then I've heard thrown around some today, which is how do you even have the capacity to start writing grants? And I think that Greg really just keyed into this challenge that, there's so much funding available, but it's that local capacity that still is a challenge. And if you don't have people who are available, you can feel kind of stuck. And it feels like there's this big windfall that you can't grab a hold of right now. And I totally get that feeling and that worry that people are having. And so I'm not sure what the answer is everywhere, but I can tell you how we've approached it in the Rio Grande Basin with quite a bit of success. And this goes back to over 25 years ago when the people in the San Luis Valley came together and they were like, man, the river is not functioning like it used to. We're not able to pull water for Headgate. We're not seeing, pull water for irrigation out of Headgates. We're not seeing the same wildlife habitat we used to. We're struggling to get water to the state line for compact obligations. And so they went to the CWCB and got funding for a study. It was the first of its kind, and it was before CWCB really gave out grants. And so it was a pretty big deal at the time. But anyway, the people came together, they did this study of the river, and then they realized, all that work had been sponsored by the San Luis Valley Water Conservancy District. And so I just key into that, meaning that, spoiler alert, we found there's no easy button. It takes some local entity standing up and, stepping up and standing up and being willing to spend some time in some capacity, but then, that can lead to a lot of really good things. And so the district then had this amazing document and said, well, what do we do with this? And do we hire people? Do we start doing river restoration? And they figured out, again, it's probably not the right tool everywhere, but in the San Luis Valley, we realized that having an entity that was dedicated to facilitating river restoration, watershed restoration, that type of work, that would be important to us. And so the district actually started a nonprofit, the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project. And you guys heard from Emma Reeser at the June meeting. She's the rock star executive director of the restoration project. And so it sounds all gravy now because Emma's pulling in millions of dollars a year to help irrigators replace their aging infrastructure and to help. Right now, she's got an awesome project on the Alamosa Wildlife Refuge to help the refuge actually improve river health. And she's working with the Forest Service to do wet meadow restoration. And so it's kind of, it kind of looks just like, wow, that all came together. And I guess maybe what I wanted to share with you is it wasn't always so snazzy. It wasn't always as highly functioning as it is today. And that it did take the local districts continuing to invest in this work. And so I think maybe that would be, what I would encourage those of you scratching your head right now and trying to figure out, how do you get from nothing to having your own Emma? And also another spoiler alert, there's only one Emma. But how do you get to having this person who's an expert in the basin that can help do these things? It takes a lot of local investment because that person and your entity has to get credibility to be able to then get outside grants from CWCB, from Gates Family Foundation, from all these different groups that help fund capacity. And so the Conservancy District, the Caneos Water Conservancy District, the Rio Grande Water Conservation District all come together every year and support this position. And I think if that's a one thing that I could tell you guys that is kind of your easy button, that right now it's budget time. We're in, October, we're almost to November. So all of these different water entities are working on their annual budgets. And so this would be a wonderful time, I think, for the districts to kind of look in the mirror and ask yourselves how dedicated are you, or how concerned are you about being able to get capacity built in your basin? And are you willing to put forward some funding? We put our district's pretty small. We just have me full-time, and then I have a part-time assistant. And we put in $16,500 a year. We pull that together because it's that important to us. And so I think maybe that might be a suggestion I would have, is that the local entities figure out a way to step up and either hire someone internally or hire someone as a contractor, get some momentum, get some of that CWCB capacity building funding to then get things rolling. And I think that's a way that you could build some momentum and not miss out on this big, historic event, because it sure would be a shame to have projects that go unfunded. And, I'm happy. I don't want to take up too much time because I know we're already a little behind, but that's how we handled it in the Rio Grande. And, again, I think we've seen incredible successes, and now the restoration project is poised to be that entity that's out there snagging dollars, federal and state dollars to infuse back. And where Greg was just talking about, we've got ditch writers with anecdotal or historical knowledge, and Emma's working with every single one of those people that wants to do a project right now that's come forward on both the Rio Grande and the Caneos and Saguache Creek. We're also trying to help the Acequias in the Culebra Basin. And so I'd say really it's about, I understand it's challenging in our small communities, but I think now more than ever, if our local entities can invest in our own people a little bit, it can pay dividends. So thanks, Dan, for the invitation to be here. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Carol in case there are any questions, but I just wanted to leave some.
Great. Thanks, Heather. And next we'll move to Carol, and then we can maybe open it up more for any question and answer. But next we have Carol, and she's with the Arkansas River Water Collaborative. And on a side note, Carol and I have worked together, we think, for about 20 years on various different, especially forest health issues that are tied to watershed health, obviously. And she's been an amazing leader on these issues statewide for many years since I've known you. So thanks for being here, Carol.
Thanks, Dan. Can everybody hear me okay? So as Dan said, I've been doing this a long time. When I originally came to Colorado, I worked in water and wastewater treatment. I managed Frisco Sanitation District back many, many moons ago. Then my husband and I got a wild hair up our ass, I hope I can say that word on tape, and decamped to Minnesota, where we farmed commercially for 10 years, milked cows and raised beef, pork and lamb on pasture. But it was not Colorado. And Ken's a 5th generation Coloradan, so we came back home. And when we came home, just the time I got back to Colorado, there was an ad in High Country News for a watershed coordinator for the Upper South Platte Watershed Protection Association, which went on to be the Coalition for the Upper South Platte. And we were one of the early, really, I would say, very successful watershed groups that built capacity around the concept of a watershed and doing work collaboratively. So we had all the water providers, we had all of the local counties in the Upper South Platte Basin participating. We had federal and state agencies. And as Heather said, now you can look at CUSP and it looks easy, but it's a hard job pulling together that collaborative initially. And one of the things that it does need is that kind of support, baseline support from local community groups. So the local water providers, the water conservancy districts, folks like that being engaged. Once you get a little wind in your sails though, then, also like Heather said with the Rio Grande, CUSP has brought in tens of millions of dollars over the years to the watershed. We've done green forest mitigation, post-fire recovery work on some of the largest fires in the state until the last couple of years. And we're very active at working at that scale. So fast forward to ARWC, or the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative. In 2015, when the basins began working on their original basin implementation plans, CWCB gave the basins an instruction to include watershed health. And for most basins, they hadn't really dived into this concept of watershed health. But at that point in time, the Arkansas had had a couple of fires already, which CUSP came down the hill and helped with. And so basin members asked me if I would sit on a committee that was going to help talk about watershed health. Fast forward through that process, and the committee recommended to the entire roundtable that they form the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative as a nonprofit partner that is affiliated directly with the Basin Roundtable, but is a freestanding nonprofit organization. So ARWC incorporated, I want to say in 2016 or 17, and I was their first acting executive director, and then stepped in a couple times over the years during transition periods. Terry mentioned a little while ago on the Ark Basin update that we hired a new watershed executive director it's almost a year now, Terry, named Jonathan Packlian. And so he's starting to really move with the ship, and it's a great thing. In the Arkansas Basin, the basin, sort of like the South Platte, Jim, we're split into the kind of west of I-25 mountain basin and the east of I-25 plains basin. And so ARWC has spent a lot of time on the west side of the basin, focusing on wildfire recovery from some of the fires and focusing on green forest mitigation work up there. But we did just work with Lake County and some other partners to go into the Natural Resource Damage Fund that came out of the Lake County CERCLA action for the historic mines up in Lake County. And so ARWC was approved for, I think it was $7 million that will be over a 5-year period, kind of rolling as contracts happen, that's coming into the basin to do some green forest mitigation. So what I mean is cutting trees, in case that's not clear for anybody. Some replacement of culverts that are both problematic for the county transportation wise, but problematic for the river hydrologically, hydraulically, and for fish passage, and some river restoration and channel projects. Then in the lower basin, as I think Jairus mentioned, there are significant water quality problems down there with uranium, with selenium, with fecal coliform, with other water quality constituents that make the water a little less desirable to drink in those lower communities. And that impact at this point in time, the state of Kansas is starting to complain not only about whether or not they're getting enough water, but whether or not they're getting quality water. So we helped pull together a watershed working group down there. And the great thing is we helped facilitate pulling together that group that included EPA, State Health, NRCS, the Colorado Department of Ag, local entities down there, including the Lower Ark Conservancy District, who actually then took off and ran with the project and has had, I think at this point in time, they're at like $3.5 million of grants to address water quality coming from the field. So that's irrigation efficiency improvement because of the selenium is being delivered by return flows, and looking at doing that within the context of water rights. So those are some of the projects. I will reiterate what, again, Heather is spot on that it looks easy once it's done, but getting it going is challenging. At the basin level, I will say in 2015-ish that we started talking about this, there were definitely members of our basin community in the ARC who were very skeptical of this idea of a watershed collaborative associated with the basin, with the roundtable. And yet now I think our members are happy that RWIC is there and is able to help. Another thing RWIC has helped with right now is they're helping with the PEPO efforts because they lost their PEPO coordinator for the Basin Roundtable at an inopportune time for the basin. It was good for her. But RWIC having us there was able to step in and help proceed with a lot of the PEPO type work. So they have helped with grant writing for some of the smaller entities in the basin. One last thing I would say that I think collaboratively as we get capacity to do these things, I believe these kind of collaborative groups can also actually help with water projects themselves. So right now we've focused on forestry in the Arkansas and water quality in the lower basin. But there's no reason for some of the smaller entities in some of these basins that this kind of a collaborative approach can't be the spearhead to help get those projects done where there's multiple small entities that don't have the capacity of a Denver, an Aurora, Colorado Springs, or even a Summit County or a Boulder County, they have capacity. But when you go into Huerfano County, for example, they don't have a lot of capacity. So having the collaborative that can help do that for them is important. I'll leave it at that. And I think if we can take questions, I don't want to go too long.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, questions for the panelists? Carol, I'll kick it off. From your work, I mean, it's almost, I almost view your entity as almost like the first successful, I'd say, like collaborative in the state. The folks around the table and online, either represent a certain geographic basin, as you know, in the state, or they're appointed by the governor. But especially for the basins, they've worked really hard on updating what's called the basin implementation plans. And we at CWCB and the DNR have been working really hard to look at, common themes. And when you look at all these different BIPs, a real common theme has been, wanting to do more on forest health and the tie-in of forest health and watershed health. And, it only takes one or two major scale wildfires to get folks' attention to really see how that can impact your watershed, obviously, and water delivery system and so forth. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on like kind of lessons learned, like like what advice do you have for folks online or here on, successful projects to gain those like off the ground? Like who needs to have a seat at the table, or what? I'm sure I know you've had great success. You may have had some issues, that you've had some challenges as well, but just kind of takeaways.
There's been a few kicking the door
on
the way out moments over those years.
What are some kind of golden nuggets? Yeah.
But I think, golden nugget wise, part of, especially when it comes to fire and watersheds. And if you haven't had a fire in your watershed yet, thank the Lord. But don't think you're not going to at some point in time. And what we know now after all these years is the post-fire impacts go on for decades. It does not end when the flames are out. You're just beginning the problem from the watershed perspective. So really looking at the pre-planning, and whether it's through a stream management plan, community wildfire protection plan that includes watershed protection, really starting to think about those types of planning processes way ahead of time. And, when the fire happens in that watershed, what are you going to do about it? Where are the critical areas? Where can you be staged for mitigation work ahead of time, or at least have a roadmap for these are the areas for our water supply that we think we need to protect immediately after a fire happens. Grand County 2 years ago had 2 big fires. And so the other thing I'd say is don't count on the state's probability maps for burns, because if you looked at Grand County, you guys would have gone, oh, we don't have any problem. We look pretty safe from a fire standpoint. And now you have the largest fire in the state started in Grand County. So figure it's going to happen. And how do you be prepared? Having these kinds of place-based watershed coalitions or collaboratives or forest collaboratives in place, when it happens, you will be so much further ahead than if you're trying to create that after the event. So we saw that in the 2013 floods, where the areas of the state after the floods that already had a watershed group hit out of the gate way faster than areas that didn't have that kind of local collaboration going on ahead of time. So I think the golden nugget is, starting to collaborate sooner rather than later at your local place-based level is critical. And the sooner you can figure out how to pay for a coordinator or some kind of initial staff person, and it might even be a half-time person at first, but the sooner you can pay for that person, the sooner you will grow the entity into where it can actually be a very positive entity for the local basin.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. I have the same question for Greg and Heather. Is there, one or two, real big takeaways that would be great advice for the IBCC on getting projects off the ground, or any big nugget to share? So either Heather or Greg.
Yeah, I think, especially the way you initially framed that question, Dan, of kind of who needs to be at the table. I think about that as invite everyone, invite all the water users and the recreators and, all the farmer groups and anyone you can think of who might be interested in and willing to help with the project, but don't wait on anyone. I think that's something that we've seen as our success here, is that we always joke, and Nathan said earlier, there's nothing to see here, but his big old brain, he's got all kinds of great one-liners we use. And so, we talk about the STP, the same 10 people. And so I'd say don't wait. If you've got a critical mass of people who are willing to put together a project and volunteer a little bit of time to get it off the ground and get the momentum, don't feel like you have to wait until you get permission from people. Another great thing Nathan says is make them stop you. And I think that's something that we've really seen is if you've got an idea and you can get going, just do it, because time is of the essence, and it's so important that we get these things done and that we make progress. And a lot of people are going to sit on the sidelines until they prove, or you prove, that the project is a success, and then they're going to jump on board. I guess one last Nathan Combs quote, I was trying to think of a better word for that, but one last thing he talks about is NASCAR, that we have a lot of people that sit on the sidelines until someone else is a success, and then they want to put their sticker on your car. So I guess my advice is be like Nathan. No, but really it's just get going. Don't worry about asking for permission, and don't worry if not everybody will show up. If you've got a couple people who mean well and are willing to volunteer and support you, go for it, because that's what it takes.
Great, thanks, Heather. And I don't know if everyone wants to be on the school board or school president like Nathan is as well, but that's a tough position. Greg, I don't know if you're still able to join us. I know there's not great cell phone coverage over by Blue Mesa, but if you want to add anything else, please do so. No, okay, yeah. All right, any other questions for the panelists? Great. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Really good. Thanks for being here too, Carol. Yeah, thank you. Okay, next up we have Aaron and Lisa that will give us a update on the work plan and PEPO. So let's see, Lisa, you want to kick it off first?
Yeah.
As Aaron runs away.
I'll go ahead and kick it off. That cracks me up. We were just talking about the same 10 people. Heather, you just make me laugh. We call it the cupcake moms, and that's not to be sexist, but it's always the same moms bringing the cupcakes every year to the Halloween party, to all the parties. So you can be a cupcake mom too. So anyway, there's nothing better on an agenda than somebody who'll get you caught up. So I'll try to put together some thoughts, and then we can have a little bit of a conversation. There was a work plan subcommittee. The result of those discussions really was a realization, the call to action that director gave us. And it's so exciting to hear all of these report outs, because we're seeing a lot of progress. I mean, if you compare our conversations from a year ago to today, think about how many more things we're talking about, real things, real progress, right? One of the things that's important to me is PEPO, and Lauren mentioned the additional state funding for PEPO. I know some of the basin roundtables are struggling with PEPO reps. That's something that we're going to try to rectify. The PEPO group is meeting next Friday, but those new statewide fund infusions are going to let us do a few things. I think we're talking about online education portals for early professionals, adults, as an educational tool, cross-basin videos, translations of roundtable materials and videos. So a lot of exciting things are going to be able to be happening with those funds. But in addition to that, we're hoping to create, I think we've talked about a basin roundtable handbook that can help guide board members and help recruit new board members. And part of that handbook will likely have a component of who the IBCC is, right? Who we are as a group, how we were selected, and what our mission is. So I've been talking to the team at the state, and it was brought to my attention that Laura Spann, Southwest Water Conservation District, when she was cleaning out her grandfather's desk, John Porter, from the Dolores, she found something. And when I read it and I reread it, I thought this is kind of what I'd like to talk about. Just in closing, it's a conversation. I'm apologizing because I brought copies, but the folks online, and many of you maybe aren't in our distribution list. So hopefully, Kat, you can pull it up and we can get everybody copies. And I do have, so I have hard copies for us.
I think Jeff is going to, Jefferson will put it in the chat.
That's my grocery list, so we'll see that over here. So where this came from, there was some conversation about whether or not this came from the roundtables and it just sort of organically grew, or this was actually an IBCC product. But this is a page, and Kat's going to get it.
They're going to put it in the chat.
Sorry, I keep looking at Kat. I should be looking at the guy behind the curtain. They're going to be pulling this up. It's basically a list of the qualities and skills for an IBCC rep. And when we're thinking about actually putting our mission and our group together to put in these basin handbook that we're anticipating, it'd be good to kind of touch base on this and see whether or not there's anything that we could certainly add to this list. And
It's in the chat, Lisa. So they-
oh, it's
people
going to come.
Online can access it, but it's not going to come up on the screen.
Oh, so they can see it?
Yeah, it should be in the chat as a link. that they can-
Okay, so everybody look in the chat. There should be a link. I always expect to see something when you say that, but of course you can't see it.
I know, I'm waiting to.
So you know, the leadership that you've all been contributing has just been so fantastic. And I'm so proud and honored and humbled to be part of this group. And when you read this list, you have to think to yourself, you know, at least I reflected, you know, am I this? Can I be this? Can I aspire to be more like this? And I think it's important for all of us. And so I'll just read through it really quickly, and then we can open it up for a short discussion and how this plays in with the whole concept of the work plan that we've been talking about, right? So at the top it says, possess integrity, community leader, and statesman, or cupcake mom. So somebody who's trusted. And you know, I think that one of the things that Dan has been so good for us is creating this dialogue that we're having. And the only reason dialogue can happen is because of trust. So that's very, very important. Visionary, we're seeing that in the products and the projects that we're looking at. So we're trying to aspire to have that vision and give people that vision, share that vision so other people can have that vision, because that vision will grow if other people can contribute. Problem solving, articulate, strength of character, diplomatic and non-positional. You know, we put some sideboards on some of our conversations earlier in the year about some really difficult topics that are all very much on our minds and in our thoughts. But it was important that we could learn to listen, to contribute to those conversations, and then be knowledgeable, a consensus builder. And then I like this last one. It says, at least an appreciation of the state's water law. So at least you have to have an appreciation of it. You don't have to follow it, but you just have to appreciate it. So we could probably add project proponent, project advocate. We could add things about, you know, how our education programs are supporting our mission and our visions. But after our last call on the work plan subcommittee, I did reflect, you know, did we do what you all tasked us to do? Did the work plan subcommittee give you what you thought you were going to get? So I guess I'm posing two questions. One is there anything additionally that you'd like to see for the IBCC work plan, in addition to the dialogues and the great presentations that we're getting, the updates? And then is there any conversation we want to have about who we are, the qualities that we should possess, the things that we should be doing, the things we should remind ourselves about? So, or, you know, it's a beautiful afternoon outside. So I'll just put that out there. And, you know, and then in the alternative, since we are coming to a close in our meeting, we could also take this up at our next meeting, which is February-ish.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say, I know this is, you know, brand new for everyone, so we don't want to put everyone too much on the hot seat necessarily, because you can all look it over. But Lisa and I were chatting, and we thought it'd be really great to just kind of share and, you know, just we're all here for really important tasks of you as leaders, and this is a great reminder of some of the great skills that you all possess already, but want to make sure that we bring forward too.
Aaron, you can, if there's anything you want to add. Aaron had was instrumental in putting together a list of things to be considered for the work plan. And I think that those got, you know, somewhat focused down, but.
I don't have anything to add. I mean, I think this is a great, I know, Jeff, you were joking, but you looked at me and said, uh-oh, there's a lot in here. And I think that we all live up to or can live up to this. So I think it's a good framework to consider. And I like the idea of, not that we need to add to this list, but think about, are there other ways to articulate some of these pieces? Something that I always wonder is if, and maybe this is because I'm a governor appointee and don't spend a lot of time with the roundtable itself, but how can we translate this dialogue and there's one of these that stuck with me, but our ability, I think, to understand and work through different positions. How can we provide that perspective to folks who don't think about water? I was talking to, I think, Jim earlier, like how can we bring more people into this space? I was thinking about folks at the legislature as we get towards the next session. It's at least have an appreciation of the state's water law and understand why it's important, and then recognize there's a ton of people they can talk to. So how can we become better and more accessible to more people so that they can see, hey, it's not, it's complicated if you get into the weeds, but it's an area where there's broad engagement, there's broad, I think, respect. It's not partisan. So is that a role that the IBCC can play? And I see a lot of that embedded in here. Yes, we should focus on projects and advocating for our basins, but how can we also kind of broaden the bench so it's not the same 10 people in the cupcake moms? So I don't know. That's where my head is going, is how can we be out there even more to bring people in to say, hey, this is a safe space. We all want to work across party lines and issue lines and all those different things.
So Dan, I don't know if we want to just shelve this or if there's any questions or comments from any folks in the room, or.
Well, let's see if there's any questions or comments now, and then folks can also kind of take a look at it and we can bring it up again. But Tom?
So not talking about the qualities and skills as much as the work plan, could you elaborate a little bit on what you see as the direction that you're going with that idea?
I don't have. So Lisa, do you have?
So is that a document already?
I'm trying to remember where we left it.
Well, so I think what we had a lot of ideas, yeah. And so there was an outline that was discussed, and I think we were all very into the basin implementation plans and the water plan, and so we became very, very challenged by this whole idea of getting projects off the ground, being advocates within our roundtables and trying to advocate and raise these projects up to a higher level. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we sort of landed as our next step. But the question is there more? Is there something more that you'd like to do? And I don't have it pulled up, Aaron, I'm sorry, but there were several things on that list, interstate, conservation, I'm trying to remember.
So there is a document, we didn't all agree on it, but kind of a working document, and we can send it around again, but it was conceptual. It was how can we focus our efforts in the future? And Lisa commented on a number of them. One is kind of the challenge that Dan posed for us, which is, bring forward projects from your basins and help advocate for those. A big focus of it as well, and I think Lauren and Nate talked a bit about it today, is how can we also make sure we're bringing funding into water projects, federal dollars in particular, with so much that's out there. And I think we're still a bit in a waiting period. It was part of my question about the IIJA match funding is, what's out there? If it's going to be, it sounds like the governor's office, for example, is going to be responsive to project requests from communities, from governments. We should be helping to advocate for those. If your local government is saying, hey, we need to do a water project, we have some good connections with the director of DNR and with governor appointees, et cetera, governor staff, excuse me. And there was another question, and something that maybe I've missed it, and maybe this will be something discussed at the CWCB meeting. And it's also a project that I know CAWA recently received a CWCB grant on, is how can we support implementation of intrastate, in the state conservation and drought management? Tom, you and I were talking about what do we do about the big interstate issue? Maybe that's not our role, but how can we help our basins adapt? How can we learn from each other? Pat was talking about some of the projects down in his neck of the woods. Is that something that is applicable in other areas? So this is all I think your question has made me realize that it might be useful to narrow that down into something that we can discuss. Here are the top 2 or 3. I don't know if we take a vote or just say what kind of piques your interest.
Yeah, maybe we could do that at our next meeting too. And you know, just looking back at, you know, today's meeting, we really, I've mentioned at was that the June meeting in Breck, but you know, let's look around and let's try to meet this moment, meet this challenge that we have in front of us with the state funds, the federal funds. I would like to see Nate Pearson, you know, come or give updates at all of our meetings, because this is just like so fluid that we're still getting guidance from the feds on what, you know, monies could be available. The governor's given me personally a charge too, to not leave any rock unturned. You know, if there's federal dollars that the state can come in that could be helpful for the DNR, that we could help local communities, we're supposed to like go after that. And I'm sure that you as statewide leaders too in water are, you know, exploring every possible federal or state fund as well. And so, you know, the capacity side, you know, hearing what's available and then hearing from our, you know, like Carol and Heather and folks to really like, you know, lessons learned to get projects off the ground. And that's, again, comes back to that charge I've given you all of like, let's think big, like you're all leaders, let's get projects off the ground. Let me know if our team can be helpful. But I just think this is such a unique time period. And, you know, before the meeting start, you know, I was like, give me your perspective, because you in particular, you know, you've been here from day one. You know, not everyone has with IBCC, and I know it's evolved in many ways, but from what I see in the landscape, I'm just kind of like, let's evolve to make sure that we're meeting this moment in time, and let's all work together to not leave any federal state dollar unturned that we could be useful for people in Colorado. And it's just a unique time, you know, but there's so many other priorities too that we could explore as well to help narrow it down. But, you know, my mind's thinking like, let's all make sure we're working together on this. Yeah.
You said this is John Porter's list?
I'm sorry, Stan. Apparently it was found in like as an attachment to an email or in a desk drawer.
Because, you know, obviously I served on a lot of committees with John.
Yeah.
And I would just commend anybody that, you know, you can see where this came from. If you take a look at, you know, his biography, if nothing more, you just see that for one person from the southwestern part of the state, he was involved in more things. And I think that's where this list came from, because he's had to do all of these things just because he's one person that had to do so many things.
And it's certainly reflective of who John was, for sure. And the regional coordinators on the capacity building, I think it's going to be a huge help as well to helping us overturn those stones. And I thought I saw Nate. Did you have your hand up? No? He did. And we may have. Okay. Sorry. Pat, did you have something, or were you just?
Well, if you give me the floor, I'll take it. But I guess I was just looking at this and reflecting on this, and I was thinking about the characters you have in any sort of storyline or book you read, and you have the antagonist and the protagonist. And I look through this and think maybe you'd add another category of catalyst. And looking around the table at all of the great water leadership here at IBCC, I think our role can really be that of catalyst, where people could and should be able to come to us, like Heather was talking about, and say, you know, it may be just bouncing ideas off of us, or leaning on our collective experience or our connections or something that may be that catalyst that gets some person or group or project to, you know, kind of reach critical mass or get off the ground to where they do want to take those risks. They do want to push it forward. They do want to be connected to the resources. So I really appreciate this list, and is, you know, something I want to look at and try to emulate or be like this every day when I wake up. But I think it's a really good charge for us to translate this into action to be those people that are approachable, that can help be problem solvers and visionaries and stuff to answer the charge. So I just really appreciate this. Thank you.
Just a quick comment. I think this list ought to go into the civics syllabus for high school students, because you could take much of this and say every citizen should have these qualities, right?
Yeah, Jeff.
So just back to the work plan for a second, Lisa and Aaron. It sounds like a great start on the concept as it relates to projects. And Pat was adding, I think, the fuel to that to say if people have those project ideas, those that you see the IBCC as a great forum for that. I would personally like to throw out the idea of also having it be a place for policy conversation. Now, I'm reminded of Andy's, he kind of brought me up short the last time we talked about this, and properly, very correctly so, that the interstate issues, that's not our charter. But at the same time, Tom and I spend most of our time within the roundtable in the Big River Committee, trying to understand what the Yampa White folk believe to be the big things about the Big River. And it would be nice, I think, and productive, maybe nice is wrong. Not strike nice. We don't need nice. There's nothing on here that says nice. And it's a darn good thing that it's not on here. But it would be productive, I think, to have a place, maybe that's some kind of committee structure. Maybe it doesn't have to be during the IBCC meetings proper, but a place where the Yampa White Green and the Colorado Basin and the Ark River folk can compare notes on their perspective on Big River policy to try to drive a more unified view, because we're missing a unified view, at least at some level, right? That's one of the things that's handicapping that interstate discussion. So we don't need to get with people from Arizona, but Stan has a lot of thoughts, and at least some of them I think might be right. And I think the IBCC could be a forum. Yeah, okay, I'll go with one. I think the IBCC could be a forum for that. And so in the work plan, I'm throwing that out there as another thing to think about.
Thanks, Jeff. I think, I'm sorry, Tom, did you want to? I was going to say about the interstate conservation conversation that was part of the outline that we had that does have impact on some of the Big River issues. Recently, there was an MOU entered into by some of our brethren here at the table, Denver, Colorado Springs, Aurora Water, with several out-of-state, out-of-basin folks, right? Which was it was great progress. It would be great to see something like that happen on an intrastate. It would be great to see, Colorado stating together what our goals are, I think. And I think that would be something that could be really a good conversation, even if we don't end up with a piece of paper that we have to sign. But that's part of those conversations that isn't trying to impede the challenge that we're having interstate, which the state is doing such a great job representing us, but maybe can feed some of that dialogue where we all are together on the same platform. And I'm sorry again, Tom, did you want to?
Actually, that goes along. I was sitting here before Jeff made his pitch, thinking that kind of along the same lines. And I was thinking about the conversations we just had about how in this paper, how this is the group where we can get along, and we come from various backgrounds, but there's good people that know how to negotiate. And I was thinking along with what Jeff said, what if we took one thing per meeting and said, we recognize we don't have authority to make policy, but we can make recommendations. And I'm going to, so I don't lose you here, I'm going to throw out one that's kind of important to me right at the moment is, of the 5 points that the Upper Basin has put out there in response to Interior's request to cut consumption, what is one of our 5 points is this system conservation pilot projects. And you heard me ask Amy earlier, what's that going to look like? At what level? Who's going to administer? And I think this, for instance, this is the right group, not to take up a whole meeting on, but to have a placeholder that says, maybe we could give some feedback that's pretty well rounded and pretty well thought out on what that kind of looks like. And there's some things it might look like that might have some positives and some negatives, and we could vet that. And it seems like that we could be useful in that area. So that's kind of along with what Jeff said.
Aaron?
And I agree. And I've mentioned similar things to this in the past. It does seem like, as an example, system conservation does kind of thread the needle a little bit. I mean, it's about, as we know, system conservation projects are not administered to the state line. It's system water. They are basin specific projects, and it's about bringing in federal dollars. So it does seem like that's maybe a recognizing the potential tension with CWCB, who does have that interstate authority. I do think there's some value that could be added from the basins to say these are both bringing to the basins the fact that there will be another RFP or whatever it will look like about system conservation. Here are the opportunities, and then maybe bringing back to a shared forum perspectives from the basin. So I completely agree that might be an interesting place to start. I'm not sure what the timeline is when maybe Amy said that, when we'll expect to hear more information.
I didn't hear her say that, but I've kind of heard somewhere else that it might be fairly forthcoming. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what we could do is, just like having Amy Ostick, give Colorado River issues. I know that Becky Mitchell is also interested in attending these meetings in the future, and she actually is flying back from a Colorado River principals meeting in Albuquerque today. And otherwise, I know she'd love to be here, but it's almost like these issues aren't going away anytime soon. And it really doesn't matter what basin you're from, you're following Colorado River issues, right? And maybe we can just make sure that we're keeping that as a standing issue. We spend some more time maybe asking some questions. What does it really mean? What does this bill really mean? And so forth. We can flush out some items. And then Tom, just thinking too, I want to make sure that we as a group are staying in our lane too. And we don't, we support the good work, I guess, that Becky's doing right now. And I know that some of you are very engaged with some of the advisors with Becky and so forth, and that's really important. But I just want to make sure that we're supportive of her and that you're letting her know too what you're hearing in your basin and so forth too. But it's just a balancing act. I would say that what she is willing and able to share with everyone, she can share. But some of the information is, how do I say, almost like proprietary, I guess. Just really something that we have to be really delicate with, to say the least. But I know she works day in and night, on Colorado River issues, and even after our IBCC meetings, and I'm hoping that we have more people that can attend in person in the future and stuff too. And if Tom, you want to team up with Arkansas and Southwest and have a little meeting, after our meeting too with everyone here, like why not? So let's make sure we capture. Again, if Russ George were here, he'd say this is really important. The dialogue, starts here, and let's make sure we capitalize on that. We don't miss a moment. And so more to come. But let's just make sure. I feel like I hear loud and clear, like to make sure we keep Colorado River issues as a standing topic and make sure it's enough time to kind of flesh out, you know, what do these items really mean for Colorado? This is what I'm hearing. Stan?
This won't be a good question. That's what everybody says as soon as you say something. But, you know, one of the things that kind of goes not totally along with what we're talking about, but it seems to me there's a lack of coordination and trying to get our best foot forward. Yeah, I think I may or may not have mentioned earlier about the wonderful story where it said, you don't have to worry about the upper basin because they know all their fruits and vegetables come from the lower basin, so they'll not be tough to deal with. I'm wondering, coming out of some of our meetings might be press releases or something, yeah, on things not dipping into things that we want to conflict with anybody about, but reinforcing, you know, the position of the state on certain issues that, you know, we've got out there hanging, and get that out so we've got something formally going to the local newspapers and other people. And as we know, our newspapers haven't been particularly good to us in a number of ways. They interview people from the lower basin or California or someplace like that, or other entities that, you know, are not helpful. So that's another idea of something that might come out of these meetings.
Yeah, Kat and Lauren, is there any reason why we can't add IBCC members to Sarah Leonard's press list? I don't know, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of Stan's comment of, you know, why these, you know, making sure everyone's aware of, it's almost like making sure all the information is being shared and you all can help be a messenger too of what's going on in the landscape, right? Yeah. Yeah. But Stan was kind of like, you know, how can this group help be a messenger too? Of making sure information is totally being shared and so forth. And
yeah, we can make sure everybody's added to the, you know, whenever we send a press release out, that you all are on the distribution list, and you all can sign up for our CWCB newsletter, which contains just kind of the latest and greatest, whatever's going on. I can see if we can do that. Yeah, I don't have the ability to do that, but I'm sure Sarah does or somebody. Yeah.
Okay, I know we just have a couple more minutes. So anything else on this? So what I propose is let's make, maybe Kat, you or Russ can send out kind of the updated list on the work plan so everyone can just, you know, look through that. Does that sound good? So refresh everyone's memory of kind of where that's at. We'll make sure everyone's added to the press list. In the future as well, we'll make sure that we spend enough time on Colorado River issues and have the right people here that can help answer the questions. Does that sound good? Okay, good. Okay. Anything else? Lisa, Aaron, you good? Okay, awesome. Well, I really appreciate, you know, your thoughts and everyone's work on that. So we're just kind of wrapping everything up, but I want to just highlight a few dates that are coming up to make sure, just thinking of making sure everyone's aware. So on November 9th, there's a Colorado Landscape Summit at Metro State University hosted by CWCB. So this event will explore the landscapes of the future of a more resilient Colorado. Kat, anything you want to add on that?
It will be a full day event. I think Sam or Jeff is going to be putting a link online. Great, thanks, Jeff. And we'll have a number of different speakers kind of talking about issues around turf in particular, and just landscapes of the future, what that could look like. So I think that's a topic that a lot of people in this room might be interested in. So we wanted to put it out and make sure you were aware.
Okay, great. And then another key date, January 24th, the IBCC and Roundtable's Water Plan Celebration event in Denver. More to come on that. What's more on that?
Yeah, that one is going to be, I think, right before our January CWCB board meeting, and we're the details are still being finalized, but we're looking at hosting kind of a general event for all the stakeholders involved in the water plan, and hoping to do it maybe at a location that we haven't totally finalized yet, but we're pretty excited about in Denver. And that will also, I think, tag along with January Water Congress.
Great, awesome. Yeah, Lisa.
And Kat, as part of that, aren't we going to be selecting, or each roundtable will select a basin champion? And that will be announced then?
Yeah, that is in the works. I'm not sure how far along. Jeff, maybe weigh in if you have more details, but.
Awesome, thank you.
That's great. Aaron?
And when is our next IBCC meeting? Has that been scheduled? Somebody said February.
Let me get to that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Also, I really appreciate everyone, really taking to heart my charge to you all to help get projects off the ground. Please continue to do that. I think that's really important. Please let me know too how I can be helpful during that process. Hopefully you all have my cell phone number too. Just reach out to me and I'm happy to see where we can be helpful. And then also thinking of future events, Aaron and everyone. So right now we're looking at February 15th, 2023, June 8th, 2023, and October 17th, 2023. So please write those down. If there's any like really major conflicts that you have with those, please let me know. But these are, obviously tentative for right now. We obviously want to capture as many people as possible that can meet in person. We also still want to offer the virtual option as well for folks that just, are not feeling well or just can't make it for one reason or another. But is this working out well for everyone? Like for folks that are able to make it and then have the virtual option? Yeah. Working pretty well. Okay, good. I also just want to thank you all again for coming here. I always look forward to these meetings. I also want to thank Holly here at the Water Center, Headwater Center. Thank you, Holly. I think you're maybe downstairs right now. She's been kind of up and down, and Bob Fanch, the owner of the place, he really deeply cares about water and really wants this to be a place that everyone kind of gravitates to have these tough discussions. I also want to thank Viola and Mike and Robin for working so hard on the team to make all this happen. So thanks so much. And with that, Carol, thank you for being here in person too. It was great to see you. And really, again, just thanks for all the participants. Look forward to seeing you at future meetings. Looking at from a distance, Andy Mueller, look forward to some of the water tour stuff coming up. That's really exciting. Thanks for you and your team for helping to facilitate that. That's going to be really great, and really wish everyone safe travels and home. So, and feel free if you have not done the tour downstairs, the Headwater Center tour, that's open for you all free of charge right now. So if you haven't had a chance to walk through that, definitely do so. It's really awesome to say the least. So thanks again.